My name is Josh Floyd, TGIF. Thank God it is flat. Whoo, it's another long Friday for me, and I do appreciate everybody joining us today. We have extra special episode for everybody today. We have a guest on who has very little to do with flat Earth, if anything at all.
Josh, before you go on, we need people to mute.
Are you good? I'm okay.
Nope, I think we're good.
All right.
I didn't even see you sitting there. How's it going?
Okay.
All right. Perfect. So, joining us today, aside from our usual cast of characters, we have joining us one Mr. Alan Park.
How are you?
We are doing well. Walter, you had a little bio for Ellen, did you not?
Well, I did, but I both got distracted by trying to get that email over there to this gentleman and the family.
We are experiencing broadcast technical difficulties. Steve, stand by.
Many technical difficulties.
Stand by.
Oh my goodness! As it is live radio.
While they search for my bio, I'll sort of tell you what they're going to say once they find it. My name is Alan Park. I am a comedian in Canada, and I have been ever since I started doing Canada. And not doing Canada, I mean, that sounds obscene. But I started here in Vancouver on the West Coast, and then after several years moved back to my birth city of Toronto, where I now live, and did fairly well in that endeavor until I was absorbed by a weekly television show which cut into my regular stand-up touring, and I became semi-famous in Canada, not to brag. And then by the time I got to near the end of my term at the show, I found out after a long-suffering year of 2013 that the pain that I had been experiencing and increasing over the several months that seemed to be triggered by a rib injury at the gym with a dumbbell was, in fact, that the metastases that I didn't know about from the cancer had already weakened my rib cage to the point that even nominal pressure, it wasn't even my full weight, was actually able to pull my rib, not break it, but it felt like that. And so I went to the doctor, got it checked, and he said, well, you can't do much with ribs. You just have to keep it bound and try not to sleep on it and, wait 6 weeks. So that was the plan. And after 2-3 weeks of over-the-counter painkillers, it seemed to be getting worse and more limiting, which began to be alarming. And I couldn't gain full mobility or range of motion from the shoulder. It hurt. The more of the rib cage started to weaken and intensify. I experienced a difficulty in walking and moving forward or doing much. Then I started to go to the doctor in the summer. By that time, when I was clear that nothing was getting better, and they ran tests, and 2 weeks later, when those results were negative and there was no problem, I said, it's kind of worse now. Let's do that again. Same thing, same tests. Still showing everything's okay. But of course, it depends on what you're testing for and what you surmise is the cause. And if you run the wrong test, you can pass a saliva test while you're having a heart attack. You know what I mean? So you're checking the wrong thing. And so this got to the point where every 2 or 3 weeks, and I was going back in and et cetera. And then I had to go to a specialist in September. He was a urologist trying to take a look around, and he came to the conclusion that the only thing wrong with me was that my testosterone count was a bit lower than it ought to be, and that there were ways to counter that. But that wasn't really my painful problem at the time. I really started to get into a funk about why can't anyone so professional understand what's going on? This is scary. I lost the ability to be allowed to be hugged by anyone. My children, it would just feel like you're being crushed. Imagine everything felt like you're inside the hand of the Incredible Hulk or something. It's like I had to ask my children, please don't hug Daddy. And that sucks. And then it just kept getting worse through October, November. And then after my birthday on November 5th that year, turning 51, I was performing that night at a CBC television radio taping. And I pulled that off incredibly for myself with painkillers and just keeping a low speed and low profile and low energy to match my inability to offer much energy. Did my gig. Don't remember too much of it. Afterwards, people were going out for a drink, and I wanted to just go home because I felt so terrible. But they said, come on, it's your birthday. So off we went to the pub, and I had a half pint of Guinness. And that's kind of my favorite beer, I guess, of all time. But I haven't been drinking much lately, and I certainly hadn't been drinking this year of falling apart. And I had that Guinness, and it took a bit of the edge off for a minute or two, and then I had another half Guinness, which I only half finished, and then I had to bail on the party and go home, arriving here in my home at approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, and in brutal pain, I went to sleep. And about 7 or 8 minutes later, it turns out, I was awakened by the need to urinate that was so powerfully out of control. It felt like the old days when I was 19, 20 years old in the university days. I didn't go to university, but you know what I mean? When you go to a keg party and you're just slamming down the beers like crazy, or you go to a hockey game and you're just tipping back the pints, and that explosive urinary burst that brings you so much relief when you're full of piss and you let it go. So I had that feeling. I went to the bathroom, got that powerful feeling, allowed myself to release, and only about an eyedropper's worth of urine came out. It did bring a little bit of relief, some nominal relief, because a little bit came out, but I'm like, come on, it's got to be more than that. Oh, well, still feel crappy, go back to bed. Now it's like 1:20 or something, and I did go back to sleep. 10 or 15 minutes later, I woke up again, and when this keeps happening every 10 or 15 minutes for about a 20-hour burst, I mean, I really thought I was going to die and was insane already, because that is just such a crazy thing to keep waking up every 7 minutes, running to the bathroom as quickly as you could, which was basically a stultified gait to get there. And I realized I was fucked. I didn't know what was going on, but this was impossibly insane. I was actually lying just outside of the bathroom on the floor, as close as I could. One of my kids' beds was right near the bathroom. So instead of staying in my bed, and my kid wasn't here, I stayed in her bed on the floor so that the bathroom was only feet away. And this was like torture. This was like the same thing over and over again. And I want to add to folks listening that when I say these terrible things about myself, yeah, it sucked. It was horrible. I want to fast forward to right now where things are fantastic. I don't do this to elicit sympathy. I do this to illustrate how friggin' bad this can get. Yeah. Because that makes my recovery all the more impressive. So I'll leave it at that. You can ask questions. We can go somewhere elsewhere. But that was on my birthday, November 5th, 6th, into the day of the 6th. I spent almost all the 6th and into the 7th, just barely recovering from this. And from that point on, my demise continued rapidly. I'm not blaming it on the booze. I'm just saying I was at that late stage and I took it in anyway. And I rapidly declined to, when I woke up on the 20th of November, it felt like I had 2 spears going through my chest, just lifting me up off the bed. I couldn't breathe. The movement of my ribs was too painful. And I realized I have to go to the hospital. And I got down there and got the diagnosis later that afternoon. Aggressive, advanced stage 4 prostate cancer that had already metastasized into much of my bones, and then immediately started the cannabis oil a few days later. But 5 weeks later, they told me I had 10 to 12 months to live. And that's it. And so here it is 3 years later. I'm celebrating the other day my birthday, which I have arbitrarily decided to call the day I was going to die because it's in November, and that's right between October and December, isn't it? So I celebrate my birthday now and my arbitrary, admittedly, death day funeral. But either way, I was going to be gone by Christmas or New Year's. And it's been 3 years since. So I guess when the doctor said, there's nothing you can do, and swore to that, I guess he was mistaken, even though I didn't spend all those years in medical school.
That's amazing.
Alan, that's amazing, mate.
Can I just say happy belated birthday?
And thanks, I'll take it.
Happy belated birthday.
And thanks a lot. Yeah. Collective finger to your death day.
Yeah, exactly.
Alan, can I just say I'm having a little bit of trouble putting my words together here. It's really funny that 3 years ago I was facing something very similar. Thank you for sharing that. Very touching. And you know what? I'll smile too because of our victory. I'm also in a good place now. But lying on that floor, I've been laying on that floor when I was going through chemo, and I didn't have much to live out. They put me up in palliative care because I got pneumonia from being in a hospital bed from somebody who just carelessness. And I just remember crawling on the floor and back and forth and back and forth. There's not a lot of hope there. So good on you for making it, bud.
Yeah, thanks, man. There's some really chilling, tender moments. Tender, I mean, to myself. My partner at the time was not here, going to work, trying to put food on the table while I was, she was just gone and texting in all the time. And I was alone here in a palpable demise spiral. And things were getting worse and worse. It was very scary, but there are certain moments where your perception, I should rephrase, when my perception would change from I'm just lying on this chair trying to rest and recuperate to it's like your mind is a zoom lens on a camera and mine would just pull way back. And I wasn't thinking about I'm a guy who was on a show who tells jokes and I'm sick. It brought me more into focusing on the greater mortality. The fact that all of us now talking on this show are like a virtual blip in the evolution of whatever all of this is, whether it's really a universe or whatever. It's clearly been here a long time. Even if you were a devout Christian, who one of the ones who only believes the planet's only been here for 6,000 years, and I'm not ready to debate that, but we all agree that some people think the planet's only 6,000 years old. If that's true, it's still such a long time that our lives are so, one sand in the hourglass that isn't really to be noticed other than by you and your family, and unless you leave some kind of legacy, no one else. And even a legacy is nothing. Like, what do you think they're thinking 2,000 years ago or 1,000 years from now about Michael Jackson or somebody like that? It's nothing. And so it just put me in a perspective where I could literally like sit on the staircase and lean my head against the wall and look through the blinds in the front door and just drift off and be gone and ponder these things. I wasn't actively trying to do it, but you would just sort of involuntarily meditate out of this dire, painful situation that seemed like you're wrapping it up, buddy. It's almost over. What do you think? The way they say your life flashes before you. This is like a common trope for movies and films. I saw my life flash before my eyes. And in movies and TV, they've depicted that as like a high-speed watching of a movie. But it's not really like that, or it wasn't for me. It was more like just seeing different places and saying, like looking back, like deliberately, not in a weird sort of metaphysical way, but just having a memory of like, oh, remember that time you said that thing to that teacher and they didn't understand what you meant and just various little non-important incidents through your life you kind of think back on that I'd never thought of before in my life up until I was dying. And I just kind of recognized a few moments here and there. And you're just trying to put it all together and sort it out before the inevitable wrap-up. And at one point I felt it was pretty much definitely going to happen based on what was going on with me. And especially even more feeling like I was going to pass away the second time, because that's when I started to get numbness that began as what felt like an icy cold coin attached to the ball of each foot. It was very bizarre. One day it was in March of 2015, and I had been deteriorating again for the second time because the regimen didn't work the first time. I got it wrong, and I got the wrong kind of weed. So I didn't know that at the time. I found out later. But when I was sliding into the like, oh, this is it for sure now. I've lost it. Like, that shit doesn't work anymore. It was only good for a short while. Wow! I can't believe this, because I'm doing everything I was doing before, and I was barely able to move. And it took me 40 minutes to get upstairs, one flight of stairs down and out to the back door if somebody knocked. So I put a key out there and said, look, just come in and don't worry about it. Use the key. Here it is. And come into the house and go, are you awake? And if I am, I'll answer. And if I'm not, not. But I used to get panicky about, spending so much. And then by the time you get to the door, they're gone because they think you're not in. So this numbness that started to happen is like, it felt like I was standing on a coin. Like a large coin in Canada, like a toonie or something, or a $1 coin that's kind of similar in most countries, a dollar coin or a $2 coin. and it was freezing cold right at the base of my heel, the point where where you put the most weight onto your shoe. And that was cold in both feet at the same time. And then the next day, it was a little more enlarged than that. It was kind of like I was standing in cold water. It was coming up around the sides of my feet. Next day, sure enough, it's like the top of my feet were frozen. And it just kept sliding up every day. I started to draw on my leg with a pen, like where I can't feel it. So it would be like numb up until here. And I would just sort of prick my skin and my shin there with this thing. And I can't feel it from the foot on up to the knee. I can't feel it. Oh, there it is. I can feel it. And I put a little notch there, like the way when you're checking your are growing. And it was freaking me out because it kept on sliding up. So by the time it was halfway up my thighs, that's when everything else was so badly falling apart. That's my second visit to the hospital, this time by ambulance, and thankfully to a different county, so I didn't have to listen to the bullshit of the previous mismanagement of the first round.
Alan, is this after the diagnosis of the cancer? Yeah. Yeah,
because what happened was to put it into a button. So I'm falling apart all through 13, and then at the end of November in 13, I get the diagnosis. I start doing the cannabis immediately. We can talk about the specifics of that later, but within 3 days...
I was going to say that's one of the bravest things, and maybe you... obviously, I'm a little aware of Alan's story, and that was one of the bravest things that I heard when I heard previous testimony from you, mate, is that, you're a man that's been basically told by the doctors, there's nothing we can do for you, pal. And off you go, and as many would go, they'd go and sit at home, but you head off with an intent to not take that as definitive, that answer, and you
on its face right at the beginning. On its face right at the beginning, but it's not exactly as you say, because I wasn't given you're done for sure from the diagnostic doctor. When I had been going to doctor appointments all that year, but by the time I got into the emergency room, waiting room I must have been there for 4 hours. I think I was there for something like a 1 o'clock till 5 o'clock or something before they saw me in the afternoon. And then it was the machines and the testing. But when I got diagnosed, finally, not by the doctors and the specialists all summer, but in the emergency room that I was forced to go nowhere else because it was in such agony. I knew I needed to get cracked open with morphine or I was going to literally go insane. And so I had to go get a diagnosis, and it was just, there was no more, maybe it's something wrong with your ribs and now it's spreading to other parts of your bones. That's not what it was. So when I got the diagnosis from the emergency room doctor, after waiting that long and getting jacked up on morphine, and amazingly, the pain went away like so fast. That stuff works really well for 4 hours. And that brought a lot of things into perspective for me, because in that moment, when it started to flood through and it felt so relaxing and great, I started to cry because I realized that I had been in a severe degree of pain, increasingly so, during the course of the year. And I had been tolerating it and forcing myself to tolerate it and not worrying about it too much. But man, when they peeled that blanket back right away and I was completely painless, that was an emotional kick in the head too. I realized how fucked I had been at that moment with that pain instantly removed. But anyway, that particular emergency room doctor, he assured me that it was stage 4 cancer. He wasn't even supposed to tell me. He gave me a choice. He said it was either prostatitis, and a pretty bad inflammational case of that based on what we've been able to look at so far, or it's stage 4, or it's prostate cancer, he said, or it's prostate cancer. And I'm like, what? You don't know which one it is? And he leans in like he's not supposed to do it because he's only a lowly kind of emergency room doc, and he's not supposed to give up the gig of the specialist. And he says, it's prostate cancer. And I was like, God. And he goes, I said, well, seriously? And he says, yeah. And he goes, what stage is that? And he says, stage 4. And my gal was with me, and I looked at her, and it's just like you think in the movies when you can't believe you're getting this news. And I said, stage 4. And I was ignorant of a lot of things back then because, you're never in that position until you are. And I didn't know anybody seriously enough that had this other than my mom dying and just kicking into it. She had pancreatic cancer. That was real quick. So that was 20 years before that. So it wasn't the same thing. I didn't feel it was the same thing. I said, how do you get out of stage 4 back to like stage 3, 2, and then the hell on out of here? And he just smiled and shook his head. And he said, Well, I love your attitude, but it doesn't work that way. It's not possible.
Alan, can I just slow you down there? Just
Yeah.
For people. I mean, I do comprehend what you're saying. I just think it might be worth qualifying for.
Sure, absolutely. Ask away.
To really, you talked earlier about metastases and that. Maybe you could explain what state your body was in at this stage. We've heard stage 4, but in reality, Well, go ahead.
What does that mean? What does that mean physically? Okay. Yeah. So by this point, what stage 4 cancer was incessant pain. I mean, and this is different for every type of cancer. Breast cancer, brain cancer, there's different types of cancer. Some cancers don't even have tumors. Some do. It's very strange to me. I don't know all that about it. But I was in a place where the pain had me at the point where I was really not able to do much more in a way of locomotion than to just barely shuffle along, and not with raising my feet too much off the ground. It was like an old man sliding his feet along the floor because I didn't have the torque in my upper thighs and my pelvis to actually lift the rug. And so, okay, hang on a second. And turning off something there. And then, so once I realized that was the case, that I could barely walk and it was in so much agony, I could barely breathe and I could barely piss and I could barely shit and I was just a mess and I was depressed and I looked terrible and I'd lost a lot of weight. I was probably down at the first time of diagnosis, the first one. It wasn't as lightweight as the second one. But the first one, I'm normally, at that point, see, this is the weird thing. I've been going to the gym for like 2 years. I'm in the entertainment business. I'd lost my job on a show a year or two ago. Things weren't getting good. And I wanted to sort of, get into better shape and look more like a stronger, bigger guy just for the hell of it. And to take my mind off of not working and to get into good enough shape to be able to work and, bulk up a little bit for showbiz. And so when I got afflicted, I was at the peak of that. I was probably in the best shape that I'd been in a while and about 190 pounds. So when I first got sick, I can't imagine that I got the worst thing ever. So here I am, deteriorated from the 190 pounds, going to the gym twice for 2 hours, 4 or 5 times a week, just down the street, take a sauna afterwards and kind of get into all that stuff and learn how to do it, get some help from some guys that know what's going on. And I'm building something. And by the time, this is because the metastases had already undermined my inner strength and my inner connectivity of muscle tissue, because what happened is metastases in my particular case was and my second doctor says, oh, can I use that? That's a great explanation. The metastases is this. Everybody can understand this. Imagine you have a glass of not water, but ginger ale. Imagine you have a Tums or an antacid, one of those antacid things, or Mylanta or something like that. One of those, I'm sure they have one of those in England, an anti-acid thing when you've eaten too much of the wrong stuff. And you drop it in there and it fizzes away. And that's your bone, and that's what happens to it, literally dissolves away. And that's why you're losing weight, and that's why you're losing bone mass, and then you're just dissolving away is what metastases is. And by the time I got to see this guy and got the diagnosis, once again, aggressive advanced prostate cancer that had already metastasized into much of my bones, that's like I got that memorized now. I've said it so many times because I said it about 10 times the night I got home. I just couldn't believe I was listening to it. Anyway, once that was the case, I'm already fizzing away. No wonder I'm in such brutal agony. And I was having these pains all over my body in various spots. And now this all made sense to me, that when this guy described what metastases is that you're starting to, the cancer has left the prostate. So, because it's prostate cancer starts in the prostate, breast cancer starts in the breast. Brain cancer is in the brain, right? But as it's, or liver, bile, pancreatic, whatever, then it spreads. If it's not caught and dealt with, and if it gets bad, it just spreads. Like it leaves the source. And then even if it goes into your bones, they don't call it bone cancer. They call it prostate cancer that has metastatically spread to your bones, or lung cancer that has metastatically spread to your bones. And then you got bone cancer is a whole different thing, and you would treat that in a different way. But this stuff was already cracked into, I'll give you the list from tip to tail. It was in my bone. The stuff was heavily affecting me more so on the right side. or sorry, on the left side, which is bizarre. My rib that popped was on the left side initially. So I had this, what felt like if you took a ball-peen hammer and then just kind of 3-inch swing and dropped it directly on your clavicle. That hurt. I had the same kind of pain in both my shoulders at the point of shoulder where, you know, the ball of the shoulder, like the knee. Just take a ball-peen hammer and tap that nice and hard one time and work your way down at all those key points. The kneecaps, the ankles, all that protruding, knobby, knuckly kind of stuff, bone stuff that sticks out. The top of my neck, one of my spines, two or three of the sorry, I'm losing the word here. Vertebra in my neck had problems. There was definitely some problems down in my L4-5 region, which were already fused together due to an injury I'd had as a small kid. I fell off. We were playing, and I was up high, like a story high, on a trailer that you would. Like a caravan, they call them in England. And when we were playing up on that, I climbed up on the ladder, came down. So and fell on the ground, and my back had been fused together, the L3 and L4. So all in and around there was metastasized. My left shoulder was worse than my right shoulder. And isn't that funny? Because one time, about 12 years prior to this, I'd been playing hockey, and I got twisted up in the corner, and I got my shoulder ripped right on out. And that was a painful thing, and I got to put back in, and it was okay, and I was fine after that. This was years ago. And who is it, sir, that ripped my shoulder out in this fashion, you know, inadvertently while we were playing hockey? The great comedian from Canada who's quite well known in England, Stuart Francis. He actually ripped my arm out, that guy. So look him up. He's a very funny one-liner meister. Anyway, so there I was, like, with all the points of your body, your hips, and mostly heavy on the left side and some pain on the right side. And my least favorite, the two that I hated the most, the sitting bones, those little bones that, you know, are right in your ass. And if you got a fat ass, you probably never feel them. But if you got nothing but skin and bones, it hurts every time you sit down. Plus, they're metastasizing, so it's even worse. So there's really kind of not really a lot of place to be comfortable other than, say, lying on my right side in a fetal position on the couch with some, you know, jungle music and birds kind of singing in the jungle and just listening to distant things and pretending I was somewhere else and rocking back and forth. So this metastases that you're talking about is basically a fizzing away of the skeletal structure. And you're not going to last much beyond that. And so the doctor who originally diagnosed me said I had stage 4 cancer, and I asked him how to get out of it. He said that's not possible. But even in that moment, I was like, well, there must be some kind of fucking way to get out of this. You know, I wasn't fully committed to the premise that this guy was going to be the dude to tell me to pack it up. I just couldn't believe that this dude was going to be the guy that's telling me, you're done. So I was like, okay, I'm stage 4. Thanks for the morphine prescription. Thanks for the recommendation from this cool guy that I should get some prune paste so that I could eat 2 or 3 tablespoons prune paste, not prunes, but smashed down. It's like thick peanut butter mixed with honey. Prune paste. This is what you need if you're on morphine, and you mix that in with hot water like you're going to make a tea. But like put in 2 tablespoons of this thing, stir it around, and then you're not going to have the crazy ass, can't believe it, you got a whole new problem, constipation, that the morphine from the pain relief brings you. This is the spider web that begins with pharmaceuticals, because as soon as you get a problem from one, it spider webs out, and then you need to take another drug to take care of the symptoms of the other drug. So fuck that.
That brings up Walt. Been recently talking, mate, about kratom, which is something that I'm looking into him with regard to that, and that doesn't appear to have the gastric slowing effects that you're describing that the standard painkilling opiates like morphine, heroin, oxycodone seem to have as well. And that's
it's actually been a very regulatory herb as well. It's actually made things quite pleasant. I don't want to get into that too deeply, but it's an amazing. I mean, I had gotten a lot of relief in my life from cannabis pain wise myself. I've been able to fortunately have some visits into Oregon where it's just a whole wonderland there. And my mom, I've gotten her on the medical card out there, so she's getting a lot of relief with the Rick Simpson oil. So definitely that. But with this kratom being just accessible everywhere right now, it's pretty much been a miracle for me. It definitely has.
Alan,
It helps
can
your
I just
mood, it helps
quickly
your
ask you?
pain.
Sorry, Alan. For those who may not be familiar with your story or whatever, who are just sort of tuning in for the first time or whatever along those lines,
Yeah. Sure.
what was it that you did for yourself? I mean, I understand the spider web, the way you describe the spider web of pharmaceutical drugs is absolutely right. It's you take one drug and then you have to take 15 other drugs to counteract the side effects of the one drug. I mean, it's just a death spiral from there on in. What was it specifically that you did when you were told it's stage 4, nothing you can do, go home and die, enjoy it?
Okay, well, at that point, just to continue from that very point forward, when I asked the gentleman, what else can I do? And he assured me that there wasn't anything. And that I said, well, what's going to happen to me? And he said, well, this is going to be something that is very advanced. And they will be contacting you shortly. You will be contacted by, I don't know the exact phraseology, but I think something like an expert or one of our top people or something to that effect. And that they would be calling me and contacting me and booking me into to get seen by, I guess, some kind of specialist. And because this is a big hospital downtown Toronto called Mount Sinai, but it's also adjacent to Princess Margaret Hospital, which is a different hospital, but they're physically attached, and the doctors go back and forth between the two. And some of them even also work over in the Toronto General Hospital. So I don't quite understand how all that works, but I got diagnosed at Mount Sinai. My doctor then later on was at Princess Margaret. But anyway, the question being, like, what did I do for myself was that having asked this gentleman if there's anything to do, I was fully aware of the fact that he was an emergency room doctor. And while he was effective in diagnosing me, I also didn't even feel that this guy is going to be someone who wants to tell you what's next or how to do it, or who might even know how to tell you what's up. And I relied on the fact that he said I would be soon sent to an expert to get a better consultation. And so I was okay with that. And I thought that that would be like tomorrow or the next day. And he said, yeah, they'll be contacting you tomorrow or the next day. But I'm sure the appointment won't be, for a few days. There's a lot of people, the big healthcare system, you don't get instant service. It's not like going to get a haircut. So I said, okay. And considering I was as dire as stage 4 as he had concluded, I figured they'd be getting a hold of me the next day. This was by the time I'm leaving the hospital with the morphine and the diagnosis and everything else, it's at like 11 o'clock at night now, because I've been into the CAT scan machine and they had to wait for a while to get the results. And, so by the time I'm leaving there, it's 11. I'm getting my prescription filled, and then I had to go to work next day. But the thing is that I was putting my own judgment of how this might go on hold until this expert got a hold of me. And don't you know, he didn't call me the next day or the next day, and nobody did. And so Monday, I called them up and said, I was diagnosed last week with stage 4 cancer. I just thought somebody might have been checking in to see how I'm doing by now. And but I was told the next day or the next day, but here it is Monday. And they're like, okay, sir, well, we'll get a hold of somebody. And then it began this sort of series of phone calls where she said somebody was going to call me tomorrow. Long story short, the following Thursday, so 8 days after I'm tagged out, then they booked me into an appointment that was going to be 4 weeks from that time, but 5 weeks down the road from diagnosis, which put it between Christmas and New Year's of 2013. Okay, so leave that there for a second. I now know I'm going to see my doctor on the 27th or the 28th of December. So leave that there for a second. Let's go back in time to the diagnosis from the emergency room doctor. And in fact, let's go back. This is key. So I'm doing this on purpose. Let's go back an hour or 2 or 3 before that, when I was waiting in the emergency room waiting room with an unbelievable combination of pain that was, it was just beyond description. So while I'm in that particular state, and I don't know if anybody's been in that particular state, that if it feels the same way, but I know that lots of people have been in a lot of pain, severe pain, not just a headache. And I know that when that happens now, I've read about it and things before, but I know that when you're in it, it can actually be hallucinatory almost.
Yes, it can.
Your conscious mind seeks escape from this unbelievable, relentless, whatever the fuck, and you're gone. And when you're gone, this is the time, and you're still sitting there, but when you're gone, this is the time where you get some relief. Like I said before, in the second round, when I would just sit on my staircase, put the head on the thing, disappear into my numbness that I was afraid of, and just not be there anymore, and you get to check out. You know, I guess you just get to disappear for a while, like have a dream, then you wake up and you're back in the shit. But it's a momentary relief, similar to what I guess you're looking for from a morphine tap. Take 4 hours of pain relief or whatever. So I would go into those whenever I felt them coming. I would just slide into that. You know, it's like, oh God, I'll get out of here for a minute. You know, and so in that kind of state, when it was not really hurting so much, and I was kind of zoned out and just basically helpless and basically just waiting for the person or the nurse to come and escort me into the examination room or whatever the hell was going to go on there. While I was in one of those pockets of consciousness that are not the straight 9 to 5 paying attention to everything coffee kind of consciousness. It was more of a zoned out, I'm taking refuge from this nightmare of pain consciousness. This is when, it sounds nuts to say, I said it on Coast to Coast AM last weekend, and I know it sounds nuts, but I don't give a shit because it's what happened. I'm in a kind of a panicky state with this pain, of course, at the time. Then you zone out into this sort of drifting away from consciousness, and a very calm, clear, not a voice. It's not an actual voice. It wasn't an actual person. I'm not nuts. I don't hear voices in my head. But that's the only way I can actually describe this thing that probably doesn't have a word for it anyway. But it seemed like kind of just an awareness of going, you need to get involved with medical cannabis. And this was coming in a way to me in a tone and in a rhythm that was very calm and relaxing, whereas I was not. Whereas while I was thinking, when I was more conscious, I was more panicking and what's going to happen and holy shit, and I'm scared shitless. And if I had to, slink off from the emergency room to go take a piss while I'm waiting for this doctor who's going to deal with me in an hour or 2 or 3 or 4, I don't want to miss the call. If I'm in the bathroom, she goes, is there a patient here, Allen Park? No? Okay, moving on to the next one. And then you're at the back of the queue. So I was very much in a panic for this whole thing, and but not for this moment. Wow. You need to get involved with medical cannabis. And then I actually go back to my own panicky state right away. I go, what are you talking about? I haven't smoked a joint in like years. And it cut me off. It said, you need to get involved with medical cannabis. And I just went, okay. Well, I know those people are doing things. Now, in the political landscape, this seems like 25 years ago, but it was only 2013, right? Because so much has happened on the political cannabis landscape since then, with Colorado opening and some people getting it and some people not, like this province I live in, Ontario, completely beyond the pale of reasonability. Anyway,
Alan, that's a really important point, and probably maybe why you don't necessarily understand the importance of it over here. It's not available over here. It's still Schedule 1.
Right. No, I get it. I mean, okay. It's still not great here either. They're moving. What they're calling legalization here is actually this is how we bust people for using pot now, and then we're going to move to a new system. This is how we're going to bust people for using pot later. It's not really any kind of thing. We could talk about that later after the medical stuff. But I'm just trying to say that I had a calming feeling when I was like, okay, all right, yeah, sure, I'll use cannabis. So what if I haven't smoked a joint in a year? I could use any other kind of feeling than this. I never even thought of that the whole time I was, suffering from this. So I had that thing squirreled away in my mind. Like I should, once I get out of the hospital, and I know some people, I can make some calls. I know I hang around with some folks that do use it, and I know I can score some, and I guess that's what I got to do. So maybe I'm just going to go home and smoke it.
Did you make your own,
no,
or did you just go out and score?
Yeah, initially I did, yeah. So once I realized, Bud, this is the thing, this is a kind of a dragged out way to say, but you were talking about when did you realize you were coming up with something for yourself? So I'm saying in the dire moments of waiting to get diagnosed, I have this understanding that I'm going to take medical cannabis. 5 or 10 or 15 minutes later, I start to realize that I'm so far fucked with whatever's going wrong with me that it might actually have cancer. Holy shit. That'd be I'm so scared now. I started to realize this is maybe, and then I had the process of going through, and I'm still waiting. There's nothing else you do. I can't read anything. I can't look at my phone. I don't want to see the TV. I'm in a heightened, alarmed state that nothing else is playing but what's going on inside my head. And I thought, what if they tell you got cancer and you got to do chemotherapy? And I had always been like ideologically against chemotherapy. I'm not satisfied with the success numbers, and I know people do it, and I don't blame anybody who does. But given the choice, I wouldn't do it. But I said to myself, if they say you need to do chemotherapy, are you going to fold your own principles and do it anyway and go, but I got cancer? Or are you gonna stick something else? Like, what are you gonna do? And then I was like, well, I don't know, but I guess I'm gonna use medical cannabis and smoke joints. I guess I'll figure that out later. So these are all tropes and thoughts and things that you're thinking of when you're in agony and slipping in and out of consciousness fully while you wait to get diagnosed. So my first notion is, okay, I'm really screwed. Let's do medical cannabis later. If I wind up needing chemotherapy, I'm definitely going to say no. I'm going to promise myself I'm going to say no. So now I have some kind of rudder, some kind of direction, some kind of way to go. I'm not going to be spun for a loop if this guy diagnoses me and says I need chemo. So anyway, when he did diagnose me and said I had stage 4 cancer, he didn't tell me I was going to do chemo or anything else because he wasn't qualified to do it, because he wasn't even supposed to tell me specifically what I had. He's an emergency room doctor who was alarmingly coming up with my data, who would then pass it on to the expert, who ideally would have seen me the next day or the day after, and we'd start working on it. And he would be the one to say, you're doing chemo or you're not doing chemo. It's not the job of the Army private to do the work of the general. You know what I mean? So I kind of didn't know what was up.
Sorry to interrupt.
Pardon?
I just wanted
go ahead. No, go ahead.
I just wanted to backtrack a sec there. When you say that you sort of went away and smoked joints and stuff, is that what you thought it was all about? It was all about
smoking
because
I didn't know anything about it.
I
didn't know anything about it.
Can you tell us what it actually was?
Yeah, sure. Well, I didn't know anything about it because all I had in my head was the actual phraseology. And if you check other reports and radio shows I've done on, I'm very specific about this because this is how I remembered it, and this is how I wrote stuff down to keep track, to make sure, because when these weird thoughts start coming into your head, and it's nothing like you've ever been through before because it's coming out of trauma and panic and end of the world stuff, you write it down. It's a lot of shit that happens, and it was like, you know, for timelines and stuff like that to try to keep it together so you understand what you're doing. Yeah. So I was just going to get involved with medical cannabis, and all I knew was I need to get involved with medical cannabis. Okay, so this is on a Wednesday night, the diagnosis, Wednesday, November 20th. The next day I go to work. There's no cannabis. There's no nothing. I'm just on the morphine, right? I'm taking the morphine. I'm taking it every 3.5 hours because it runs out at every 4 hours. And I'm loving the fact that I'm not in brutal agony for this script reading session and photography session that I had to do. That was scheduled for the next day. I had to wear a suit and hold a sort of a champagne glass and look all suave and debonair. And basically, I look at that photograph now and it makes me sick because it was the day after I was diagnosed, and I see the fear and the pain and the hopelessness in my eyes that maybe somebody else doesn't. Yeah. So, but I just saw it today actually inadvertently. It popped up somewhere. But anyway, so now I'm at the place where now it's Thursday. Sometime around Thursday or Friday, and I was working both of those days on this television show, and I did have the weekend off. I made a contact or texted somebody particular and phoned somebody particular, and I explained to this person whose gender I won't even betray, just to not involve anybody else in my story that might suffer some kind of legal consequence. But this other person that I know is a partaker thereof, cannabis, and I contacted that person and said, hey, guess what? I really got to talk to you, and I really have a need for a lot of cannabis. And this person knew that, you know, I wasn't really using it for the last several years because I also used to get it a long time ago from this person. And so I went to meet this person and explained my story and said, you know, so I need to get like, what do you get, like a pound or an ounce or something? I don't know. And we started talking about things, and this particular person asked me if I was going to make the oil. Now, I didn't know what that meant. At that time, I was like, what do you mean am I going to make the oil? And this person said, well, if you're going to make the oil, you need more than if you're just going to smoke things. I don't know what you're going to do, but if you're going to need the oil as concentrate, you're going to need more than just, you know, enough weed to make a few joints or something. So I went on YouTube and looked around, and I was there talking to this person, and we decided that, you know, this particular amount was going to be better suited to me, and that worked out to be a quarter pound is what I wanted to start with, because you have to do the Rick Simpson oil with a pound. 1 pound is a whole plant. A whole plant's a pound. Cook it down. It's only 60 grams spread across 90 days, and hopefully you're done. So that's what I found out at the time. And I said, okay. let's get a quarter of that because I can't afford a whole pound. And I'm not. This is just a straight street purchase from a trusted person. So I'm going to get a quarter pound. I'm going to make that up. We'll see how it goes. And it started to go very, very well. I learned how to do this by going on YouTube. I looked up ways to make the oil, which I then realized what I was doing. And then you realize at this point, this is not about smoking joints to cure cancer. Okay, this is one of the straw man arguments that get put upon folks like myself and others all the time by the ignorant and the angry and probably the trolls. They say, oh, come on, everybody knows you can't cure cancer by smoking a joint. You're full of shit. It's like, I never said I cured cancer. I never said I did it by smoking joints. That's your mistaken impression, and I'm done talking to you now. So basically...
Just on talking on that, Alan, can I just... You alluded to the YouTube videos, and that's certainly where most people will go to learn how to make the oil. And certainly from my pharmaceutical knowledge, and I assume from your experience, would you confirm that those videos are accurate? Trust them, as much as it's weird, but trust them and they work.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say they all work because everybody, the million. Have you seen these videos on YouTube, completely unrelated topic, where some guy buys a drone or maybe a new phone or maybe some kind of guitar and they have like an unboxing? Have you ever seen those?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Or they buy a new vaporizer for cannabis or some kind of gadget or toy or thing. And it's this big deal. It's funny. The YouTubers will do it. It was like, okay, they show you opening the box. And they show you what's written on the box, and it takes like 20 minutes to open some. Like there's some kind of drama involved with this. But you can get that with you can get that with making oil and doing all kinds of things and BHO extracts and all this kind of stuff that people do. And I never even heard of any of this stuff back then. All I knew was I used to smoke joints, once in a while hash, once in a while honey oil, and that's all I knew. Right? That's all I knew. And I was getting into the game of consumption again years and years after I wasn't doing it. So the whole scene changed. And since 2013 to now, it's changed even more. There's a million kinds of extracts, problems, ways, rosins, butters, shatters, all kinds of things.
At that point, Alan, sorry. At that point, when you got to the phase where you decided to spend a bit of money and get some cannabis, did you think at that point this is going to work? This is going to work, or did you think, well, I've got $1,000, I don't want to spend $6,000. I've got, I don't know if it's going to work or not. Or what was your mental state at that point?
My mental state was that a guy just told me that I had stage 4 cancer and told me nothing more about it, and that I was in an unknown position as to when I might be seen by an expert. This is all obtained and received and started to be made and used before I even got back to work the next week on the weekend. 4.5 weeks before I actually saw the specialist. There was nothing else to do. I might as well do it. I realize I'm fucked. I've spent the whole summer using Bufferin and Anacin and Aleve and Robaxacet and all kinds of over-the-counter analgesic pain relievers to try to take some. You just had to take different ones. Like I'd take Excedrin for a while or some kind of thing, and then it wouldn't work anymore, and I'd kick it over to Anacin and you just keep moving it around, right? And you're full up with toxic garbage from munching on those pills all the time anyway. So I didn't really have anything going for me other than I've crossed the threshold into being told I have an irreparable disease. I'm trying to perform for the next 3 weeks as a comedic performer, doing funny things on a comedy show, and I'm scared shitless, and all I can think about is I can't wait till this is over so I can just lie at home and nurse my agony. But I did the show anyway, and at one point we were shooting a sketch where I had to get shot, or hit in the head with a guitar. And I had to fall forward, and we had to shoot about 6 takes of that. And it was so brutally painful, but I went through with it anyway because they couldn't betray that I was that ill, or there would have been all kinds of problems and side issues.
So were you doing like stand-up and stuff like that at this point?
Well, not at that point, no, because I'd been working as a regular on this comedy show, a weekly comedy show, so I was busy with that all the time. But in this particular moment, we were shooting the we were shooting it had been boiled down to just one special a year, like the Christmas show type of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's all. So we were shooting that, and I got injured again for real, just because of my what keeps your pelvis attached to your legs got pulled on the 6th time that I fell down on the floor. And that was the final take that we had to do for technical reasons, and I wish we got it done in the first 5 takes. But I missed the mat, and I went down on the hard floor. Ouch. And it jarred me. So that was fun. But anyway, to get back to the cannabis, so like I understand I didn't know anything about it. But when I obtained it initially from my source, this person said, well, before you leave, do you want to smoke a joint? And I said, yeah, sure, why not? This is the knowledge of getting the oil was apparent, but why not smoke a bit of that right now just to see? And I hadn't smoked in about, 7 or 8 years at that point.
Why not?
I had given it up. I had given it up because I just didn't use it much anymore, because I found that every time I got good ideas or things I wanted to do that were inspired by cannabis, that was all great for the high, and then I wouldn't do anything about it in real life. So I was an irresponsible user at that point, and I had gotten to the point where I said, okay, this is not fun, and I'm going to stop doing it. And so now I'm getting back into it, but to save your life reasons, well, I smoked half of this joint with this person, and then we put it out because I didn't want it anymore. I was so high, so friggin' high, I couldn't believe it. Your tolerance is nowhere if you haven't done it for years, right? And but I felt really good. And then the cool part of it is, and this is going to be the answer to your question from about an hour ago, what was the sign or what was some kind of thing that made you feel like you were on the right track? And so this is what led me to it. So understand, I've got the diagnosis on the Wednesday, 2 days of going to work, but arranging phone calls so that on Saturday I can pick up a quarter of the stash that I need in total, and we'll start with that and go. Uh-huh. Then on the way out, I smoke a joint or half of one. I get so friggin' high. I feel fantastic. I'm smiling. A lot of the pain kind of went away. I knew I wasn't out of trouble, but I just felt nice for a change compared to all of this terrible shit that I've been going through for months and months, and in a different way than the morphine made me feel. So I'm leaving this place now, really got with as they say, with a nice buzz on. And for the first time, I'm just not as panicked about everything. I don't have any illusions that it's all over, but hey, I got a bit of a break, And then I realize, oh my God, can I use your bathroom? And I run into the bathroom as fast as I can. And I get in there, and both ends just opened up. Now, that's not to be gross. That's not to be gross. Not at all to be gross, or to be offensive.
Yeah,
that's
cool.
To say that I had been so bunged up on both of those pipes for so long, and I got a physical, visceral reaction that all that stuff needed to come out. So now I'm high, and for the first time in quite some time, fully empty, and I could feel it, and I was practically giddy as I went back to my car with a grin on my face. My gal at the time going, "What's up with you?" Because I was such a basket case of hopelessness prior to this, and I said, I got some weed and I feel good, and we do so have these concert tickets, and whatever the fuck is going on I'll have to get to later, but I feel good. Let's eat dinner, go to the concert, and have a great time. And that's what we did, and it was wonderful. And there was another sort of over-the-top emotional effect of hearing live concert perform music that night that was an appreciation of such. For earlier, I'd never had it quite to that level, because you've been brought to your maker almost at that point, or whatever it is.
I'm just getting goose pimples here, sorry. It's brilliant.
Yeah, well,
such a great story.
So this is the 23rd of November now, and we go to this concert, and tears come down, and I talked to a few friends backstage that I happened to actually know at this concert, and didn't tell them anything. Hey, guess what? A couple of days ago, I was diagnosed with stage 4. Anyway, see you later. I wasn't going to do that. Then I wasn't going to tell anybody. So I went home. This is on the Saturday night, and the next day, it's Sunday, and I get right down to work on the studying of the Google and the YouTube on how to synthesize this oil at home. And I get busy with the research on this, and it involves naphtha, and it involves cooking naphtha at a high heat. And I was going like, where am I going to get that? Plus, I don't want to get any of that. And so the substitute is 99% isopropyl alcohol. And I decided to opt for that because I'm more comfortable with that. It's been in my cupboard for years since I'm a kid. Yep. You put a cotton ball on it, clean a cut.
Excellent choice, sir.
That's what I used.
Yeah. So I went and got myself a 6-pack of that for much cheaper than the one-off at the bulk rip-off grocery drugstore we have in this country. That's a monopoly, and pretty much. And then I went to a bulk store and got 6 of them for the price that you could buy a regular one for 1.5, and 2 or 3 at a time. I can't remember. I have it all written down because I no longer do it, and this is a few years ago. But I learned how to do this thing, and I realized, so you're going to be boiling alcohol. And I read it over and over again. I got as familiar as I could. I started to make the physical moves, and you know what? I just couldn't do it. I just couldn't bring myself to go through this procedure of cooking alcohol. It just I got scared. I got nervous. I got cold feet, you know. And then the next day it was like, buddy, you don't have any options, man. I wasn't going to work the next day on that Monday because then we got into the taping schedule of the show and I wasn't needed for that day. So instead of cooking it on the Sunday and starting it on the Sunday, I cooked it on the Monday and started it on the Monday. And so on the Monday, I had learned how to do this. And it's like a kid who doesn't want to jump into a freezing cold pool because he's chicken. At some point, you just pinch your nose, close your eyes, jump in, and it's not as bad as you think. So
Did
that's
you get
exactly
a
what
rice
happened.
cooker?
I did not. I did not. I can tell you I used a Corel livingware saucepan. It's probably a 2 or 3 quart size saucepan. It's glass so that it wasn't steel.
Okay.
And I cooked the material. I put the liquids into that. Now I've got that clear glass pot sitting on a cook pad that's called a what do they call that thing?
Yeah, heat pad sort of thing.
A hot plate, like a hot plate kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's 2 elements just like on your stove, and you can control the temperature with it. But you have to get the kind that's not a coil, and you have to get the kind that isn't red and heats up. You can't do that because if the alcohol goes on that, you will have a friggin' problem beyond description. So what you need to do is
I heard if you get a halogen one and set it to the setting of simmer milk, that is the best setting you can get for maintaining the evaporation point of isopropyl alcohol. But that's just a rumor.
Yeah. No, that's a good idea. And I'm just hacking through, the journey and the memory and the salient pieces of what I went through. But if anybody was listening to this that wanted to do this or felt like they needed to do this, understand 2 things. 1, I'm not prescribing to you that you should do it or telling you how to do it. No, I'm just telling you how I did it. And I'm just telling you that if you rattle off a series of terrible symptoms, I never tell somebody, oh, wow, you should do this, you should buy that, and you should try this. I say, wow, if that were happening to me, I would do this. And then it takes the stuff, right? But
it's important to mention that, though. It is important to get that out there. That we're not offering advice here. This is anecdotal. No. It's if you've got an issue, then it's up to you. Test it or don't.
So I had to research it enough. I had to research enough on my own to be satisfied. So to the point where on the Sunday when I had planned to do it because I wanted to get on it as soon as possible, I decided not to do it, and I did it the next day. But I researched it my way, and I came to my understanding that I was going to be able to make it. So if anybody else was going to do this, you got to come up with your comfort level, and you've got to. Maybe you're more comfortable with naphtha. I don't know. Maybe you want to cook it in it all at once and not into quarters like I did. I don't know. I'm not telling you what to do. But at the end of the day, what you're going for is the creation of 60 grams of oil. That's the main thing. You need to arrive at the 60 grams of oil from one plant, and you figure it on your own how to do it, and we can skip past that part from here on.
Maybe you could help me, Alan. I've got a number of quick, easy answer questions that maybe you could answer from your experience that isn't a recommendation for anybody whatsoever. But, so first question I'd ask is the length of treatment. Obviously chemo can go on indefinitely, or it's what was the length of treatment that you researched and thought was appropriate in terms of time?
This will be the bullet round segment where I give the quickest, most direct possible.
Chitching.
Come on, here we go.
Go.
Here's what you need. You need one plant, preferably. Now everybody's just going to get a pound of weed wherever they're going to score it the best they could do. But ideally, you need one plant from tip to root, the whole fucking thing. Just take the whole plant. Hopefully it's 6-7 foot tall by now and it's bushy as hell. And by the time it all dries up and you punk it down and take what you need, which is pretty much everything from the whole plant, like whole plant theory, not just buds, not just tops, not just leaves, not just roots, not just stems, the whole plant. because the entire plant is made up of an infrastructure, just like mushrooms are made up of an infrastructure of mycelium and etc. And ideally, now I didn't get this. I wound up getting top quality bud, and it was probably all something else. I got the best I could get. I'm just saying, ideally, you're getting a plant that you grew in the sun to the full fruition, and you're taking it and drying it. And by the time you're done with this, it's down to 1 pound. And then you process the 1 pound by the cooking method. And if you can do it all at once, great, or otherwise you're going to crack it into 4. And you cook it all down, and you cook that 1 pound plant down, and guess what it lands at? About 60 grams. 60 grams of oil is a very small pot of like a half. It's about a half size of a small pot of Marmite, and that's a shout out to my British compatriot on
Alan, do you love it or hate it?
It looks like Vegemite if you're Australian. It looks like Marmite if you're English. It looks like tar if you're Canadian or American. And it looks like a lot of trouble if anybody finds out you're cooking it in your kitchen without asking permission from the government. If you can use a fucking plant to save your life because you got to wait 5 weeks for some expert to chime in and tell you how you don't have any options. So I had some kind of foresight on my side. I had some kind of optimism. And I'm telling you, when I first took that toke that night and we went to that concert and I felt so good and I shit and pissed, and I remembered that I had this notion before getting diagnosed that this was going to be something I ought to try, and I was already starting to feel better. And then I cooked this shit up once I kicked my fear of manufacture on the Sunday. I cooked it up on the Monday, and then I took my first dose of a 90-day dosage plan. So there's your answer, 3 months. But you don't take a gram a day like you finish up at the end, because you're going to be so far into outer space you can't believe it. And tons of people that think they're going to cure their cancer quicker by taking more quickly wind up stopping the whole program because they get so hallucinatory.
That's Alan. That's one of the points I really want to focus on. With a bit of time as well. This is quite an experience people are going to have. It's not.
Nothing like it.
Yeah. Okay.
There's no life like it, and I can't recommend it.
No, and I'll for any viewers that don't know, my dad went through this and was lucky enough to be able to get hold of a similar treatment. Now, in no way was my dad's cancer at the level
right
that Alan's was. And funnily, my dad's called Alan as well. But
oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah. But and the reason I mention that isn't a decrement. It's literally the real significance of Mr. Park's story here. Yeah, that it's absolutely unbelievable in medical terms and not explainable. I'm a pharmacist, Alan. And the likes, and this is just not discussed or explained. So, I'm going
to counter you on that. I'm going to push back on that, and I'm going to say you're dead wrong about that, but not in an offensive way. You just didn't see some information that was deliberately buried. I'll reference it later.
There's stuff there, University of Madrid and stuff. There's hell of a lot of stuff, particularly with astrocytes. And in terms of I'm aware of what I mean is conventionally it's not discussed professionally.
Oh no, not at all.
And wouldn't be recognised is the point I'm alluding to.
Unfortunately, even in the states here in the United States, in Oregon, where it is legal medically and recreationally, it was a struggle to get my mother a card. We had to find a doctor who charged an outrageous amount because the medical industry there still will not recognize it. When you go see a normal doctor there, you never let them know you're on a medical card or that you're using cannabis in any way. They mark it in your record and it follows you around. So it's ridiculous.
It's important under the current climate to do that, Walt. But there is a reason, and Alan alluded to it first, and that's the importance of actually stepping up to the dose. Now, the first few weeks of the dose is really about you getting a tolerance for you to be able to function as a human being. Okay, and I don't know, Alan, for you. I mean, my dad found it very hard. He's a strong man, and he actually persevered and stopped functioning as a human being for a bit, but maintained the dose. And I thank God for his belief in the shit I was spouting at the time, frankly. But maybe you could allude to actually just to give people a reality that this isn't you buggering off and getting stoned for a bit.
No,
this is actually quite a difficult treatment for people to undergo, and it requires perseverance of willpower to keep having to take that dose every day.
Well,
that's right.
To keep getting stoned.
Yeah, well, the first day I had, created this stuff. So now it's Monday, the Monday after my earlier Wednesday, 20th of November diagnosis. It's the following Monday now. I've been making this stuff all day. It took about 5 or 6 hours. I cooked up a quarter batch, so about $700 worth at the time, Canadian. So that was probably $650 American, and then I don't know, 280 or 300 pounds or something for a quarter. I don't know. That's what we paid for it anyway. That's what I paid for it. I don't know what I'm just saying that's what it translated to.
Well, while you're on that subject, just to quickly, because again, I think this is an important point I did want to mention. In terms of this treatment, cost-wise, if you were to price this per ounce at street value, I would suggest the course of treatment UK-wise would be round about the £2,000 mark.
To get a pound?
For the whole treatment, I would suggest about £2,000 if you bought it at the price per ounce street value that I've seen on the internet.
Okay, well then you're paying more than we are, because at the time and even now, it depends on the quality of weed, of course. But a pound here, depending on if you can get it all at once or whatever, it would be depending on the quality of the weed, and it would be somewhere between probably $2,700 and $3,200 Canadian. So it's a lot of money, but this way you don't have to wait. This way you don't have to fill out a bunch of forms. I started to call some people about, well, I have to get legal. I have to get my forms so that I'll be able to be allowed to use this. And I found out very quickly that there was no way, even if there was no way I was going to be able to get enough cannabis from a legal prescription to be able to synthesize this. This isn't for smoking joints, okay? This is for making an entire pound into a small amount of liquid tar kind of thing. And I knew I wasn't going to be able to gather subsequent mailings of small amounts of dried marijuana until I got to the point where I could use a quarter pound and then go ahead and start cooking. I knew that was going to take too long. I knew it was going to take too long for the paperwork, because I talked to some other people in a similar situation of applying for their medical legality and license, and I understood this could take anywhere from 2 months to 9 or 10 months to get it. And so I'm supposed to sit here and deteriorate at this rate and deteriorate so quickly and in such an awful way because somebody's going to finish some paperwork and send it off to me?
Not to mention, Alan, that it would take
just dissolve.
It would take 4 months to grow your own minimum.
Yeah,
I would say that there is no such thing as paperwork for that over here, and if anybody is wanting to access this kind of idea, then it is done under the threat of prosecution if discovered.
Because you're saving your life with something, and they gave you no other option. But listen, if you guys in England want to check out Croatia, it's a lot closer to you than it is to me. That's where Rick Simpson lives now.
Yeah, right. Rick Simpson, before we go on, it's phoenixtears.ca, is that right?
That's it. Go there, check it out. Read all pages, watch all videos, understand that, and then we can talk.
Yep.
Absolutely. Guys, sorry. Can I just pull it back? Because we were on a really poignant point, which is in terms of dosage introduction.
Okay.
And it is a few bits that I really do want people to comprehend. So I just wonder, Alan, can you just again just maybe to explain how long it took, and was it easy? Obviously, it was fun early on, I would assume. But I'll leave it with you.
It was actually kind of fun. I did find a lot of pleasure in countermanding the system, not waiting for something that I ultimately realized, and it didn't take long, that I didn't need to wait for this. And this is where you can bleed into like freedom information radio, freedom slips. People talk about the sovereign man movement. I don't really understand much about that other than, being told what you can do and not do by the state. I've understood some of these practices, although not participated in any kind of like trying to kill cops or however they they do this whole thing with the sovereign man kind of deal, and there's movements of this, and I'm not mocking it. I'm just saying I know they're out there, and I don't know much about them. But I did realize that when I was sick as hell, and I had to wait for a bureaucratic piece of paper to come back after I went to all the trouble of filling everything out and running around, and then just wait and deteriorate and continue to take the morphine and these other things. And man, I was spiraling around. Like, you don't understand the PSA level and the general demise and decline of the body. Eventually, it doesn't just keep on increasing, from 4 to 5 to 7 in the PSA to 10 to 15. Eventually, it starts doubling. So when I got diagnosed in the first place at the doctor's assigned with the Emerge doctor, coming in at a 700, and now I'm following up a few days later. I mean, if I'd have waited 5 or 6 months, the 700 wouldn't even have sat there. It would have gone to 1400 and so on and so forth until rapidly you crashed. Like, it wouldn't have just kept on going. And I realized that, and I thought, this is nuts that I would even think that I would have to ask permission from anybody. So keep your mouth shut. Just do what you got to do. Worry about the law later. I'd rather defend myself in court for what I did than be legal and fucking dead. You know what I mean? It wasn't a very difficult choice to make. So, so the dosage.
Yeah,
okay, so here goes with the dosage. Your question to that point, the dosage. So I've made the
amen,
batch.
brother.
It's now Monday the 25th or whatever it is. Yeah, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, Monday the 25th. I've made the stuff. It looks like it did in the video. I feel pretty confident about this. My only hope now is that the stuff's actually going to get me high. But I took a little puffy of some stuff before that, and I knew it was good stuff. So I knew it must have worked, and it looked good. So now what you've got at this point is you've boiled all the alcohol completely away, and you eventually decrease the heat because you don't want to burn the actual tar into a black, char. You want it as a tar, like an oil. It looks like Marmite. Like I said, it looks like So you want that?
Could I add another technical suggestion there? If you go and buy a 10-pound coffee percolator, rip the top off it, and just keep pressing the on button, you'll find that's the best thing. It keeps the temperature low. It stops evaporating off the higher terpene-based cannabinoids. But certainly, eventually, over 24 hours, it's a bit slower, but it does work a lot better at getting rid of the water and keeping a full mix of the
Can I just add as well that you don't need heat at all, is that you can actually just put it outside with a bit of gauze over the top and let it evaporate.
But what else? Oh, yeah, right, okay. Well, listen, that may be true, and like I say, everybody has to find their own path. I was just following as best I could the Rick Simpson methodology.
Right.
He knew more about it than I did. But I kind of think right now that maybe you've got some kind of stocks or shares in a coffee maker company.
Yeah, that's Iron Realm Coffee.
Iron Realm Coffee.
That's what we need stock.
Hashtag Iron Realm Coffee, yeah.
If you actually listen back, Alan, every break proceeds with us going, we're going to go and get a cup of coffee now. So maybe you've uncovered something there.
And I'd like to say at this point
right?
that I don't drink coffee at all.
Okay.
And I'm not endorsing anything.
You're not human.
I'm endorsing natural. Stick it outside. What I do is stick it in a baking tray, a glass baking tray. But I only make absolutely, tiny amounts at a time. What you would spread on your toast as Marmite. But it's the isopropylene or whatever it's called, the 99.99% alcohol, and I just leave it outside and it evaporates, and then I get a razor blade and scrape it off the bottom.
Right. On
So now
that, guys. In terms of dose, okay. I just want to get this in. Go ahead. Maybe Alan, you could just follow up, or you, Walt, in terms of maybe other suggestions. What I heard was effective was if you start with literally half the size of a grain of rice, take that, go to bed, sleep. Try the same the next night, maybe a little bit more. Keep doing that.
Nope. Stop you there. Nope.
Okay, bro.
This is how you're gonna do. This is how you're gonna bugger it up and get too high, and then you get scared. Especially if you're a kind of person who's been game enough to try this in the first place at 50, 60, 70 years old. But in your earlier life, you were one of those straight-laced kind of people that never smoked joints or anything like this at all, like your Aunt Gladys. Right? So if you're a person like that, who's never really done this, maybe been a tippler and drink a little, you know, booze here and there in your life. But if you're a person, there's lots of them out there, probably a lot of people, more than I could even imagine, that just never did it. They weren't kids in school who were prone to try it. They didn't do it later. They got a good job. They saw people doing it sort of, you know, here and there, making mistakes and fucking up, like you might have looked at me 20 years ago thinking that. And so there are people who have consciously lived their entire adult life on the planet who've chosen not to partake of this. It's not so weird. But some of those folks get cancer.
I know
and some of those folks then try this stuff. And those folks, if they come up on this too quick, it'll scare the living shit out of them. Whereas if you've already smoked a joint, even at 20, 25, and now you're 40 or 50 taking this thing, you'll be like, oh, yeah, that sensation. Okay, right? And it doesn't mess you up as much, even if it gets a little out of control. So I beg.
And there's nothing worse than an edible high that has gotten on top of you. There's
no, exactly,
you know,
exactly.
That's the longest waiting period there is, I believe.
It absolutely is true. And when I tell people about this particular remedy, I beg them, I insist, I demand. You need to follow this dosage chart if you're going to do this, because if you don't, you're going to come up too fast and you're going to bail on the plan and lose the overall benefit. And you know why they do it every time is like the amount you take is so inconceivably tiny at the beginning. The conscious brain, the logical, normal mind goes, oh, come on, this can't do anything. I'll take a little more and speed this process along. Wrong answer.
You
Wrong
know,
answer.
Okay, on that one, Alan. My wife. Sorry, go on, John.
Sorry, mate. No, it just reminds me so much of my first trip to Amsterdam. You know, I thought I was a smoker. I was smoking resin. I was doing this, that, and the other, and you know, constantly. And then my first trip to Amsterdam, I went in and asked for a pre-roll from some coffee shop and sat down, smoked it, and whited out completely, and was just you know, complete. It was just like, oh,
I remember crawling up the steps of the grasshopper, John, on all fours. Is all I remember.
But that's what it can be like, you know, for someone like you're saying, that someone who hasn't smoked, or someone who's not used to this sort of thing, or even someone who is used to this sort of thing, is not used to taking half a grain of rice of oil. I remember when I gave some of this to my dog when he was suffering from a huge tumor on his paw, and I completely overdosed him, and he was you know, flitting out on the bed and scared shitless and everything, and it was just like, wow, I'm never going to do that again. You know, you got to get the dose right. And so what would you say, like, minimum?
So let's talk, Alan, about titration, for want of a better word. Well, how did you titrate the dose up?
Can you explain that, Adam, while you're there?
Sorry, how you increase the dose on a daily basis, both in terms of quantity and frequency.
Okay. So the answer to that is simple. Because I was doing the Rick Simpson methodology, and because he was successful, I wasn't interested in playing around with coffee makers and rice cookers and all of this. I was trying to emulate as best as possible his methodology, merely substituting naphtha for alcohol. He recommends naphtha. He knows what he's talking about. I just never got comfortable with it. It wasn't going to happen in my house. I wasn't going to do it. But other than that, I followed his methodology to the letter, including the whole process, everything. But I was doing it a quarter at a time, okay, rather than doing it all at once, because I didn't have the room in the implements and etc. I would have needed a much larger cooker to take in a pound, and I just did a quarter at a time. But other than that, I followed the methodology, and he also has there's also a chart that's been devised. You can download it now if you're listening, called World's First Rick Simpson Oil 30-Day Dosage Chart. So you can work your way up to 1 gram per day much easier with this chart. And I know lots of people that go take a couple, then the next day double it, next day double it. This chart is fantastic. I've tested it out myself because the very first time I did it a little bit differently. So I'm not going to tell you that too much, other than to say I took way less than what's even on the chart. My first dosage day was the Monday night that I had finally created this stuff. I was kind of afraid of this result, this product, because on the one hand, I thought, shit, this isn't going to work. And on the other hand, I thought, oh my God, this might work. right? So I didn't want to take it all day. I took it about a half an hour before I went to sleep, and I'll describe the measurement to you exactly. It's less than a half a grain of rice uncooked. I'll tell you how much it was. It was a pinhead. A pinhead. So I know people don't sew their own socks and fix things anymore, but I hope you've seen a pin, like a sewing pin, you know, for like sewing. Like, you know, those things your mom used to stick in your sleeves to adjust the hems and whatever. A pin. And on top of that pin is a head that's so tiny that a ladybug could probably swallow it, okay? So a pinhead. That's the thing I took the first day, and I had a nice sleep. And the next day, I took another pinhead just before I went to sleep because I was working on this show too, right? I couldn't be all spaced out. That's another thing. I couldn't be all spaced out the next day. People would be asking questions. I was already having great mobility problems. And in this big studio TV thing, I was arriving at my meeting places like well early ahead of the gang and taking different ways in the hallway to get there so that they wouldn't see me shuffle in like a 90-year-old man who got ice in his pants. So I was arriving at places before folks were, and I was waiting to leave after everybody dissipated, just trying to get away with this shit. I didn't also need to be spaced out and high and try to find my mark in the floor in a television show rehearsal. So I was, you know, doing the best I could to kind of manage things in that way. But so I decided not to do the half a rice thing. And a pinhead is probably like a quarter the size of a half a grain of uncooked rice. Think about that. Everybody that doesn't cook. An uncooked grain of rice, cut it in half, and then take that half and make a quarter out of it. And I did that on day one. I got a nice sleep. I did it again on day two, another nice sleep. I did it again on the Wednesday, another nice sleep. And here's the cool thing. And this goes back to when did you know you were on the right path? So now I've had 3 days, 3 sleeps of one pinhead a night. And when I wake up on the Thursday to get up and get ready to go to work and grab a coffee and try to get some eggs into me or whatever, and then off to the show, I'm putting the morphine tablet in my mouth that I was taking every morning to alleviate the pain when I realized, wait a second, I'm not actually in pain. And I put the morphine tablet back into a little carry case, and I used that on my keychain. You're goddamn right. I carried that stuff forever in case I needed it.
Just in case.
Right? Just in case. You got a couple of slams and some pretty decent hydromorphone. It feels good just to have it in case you all of a sudden break out into some weird pain.
Feels even better not to have it, though.
3 days of pinhead of this oil. This is the salient point. 3 days of a daily dosage of a pinhead. And I took it about a half an hour before I'm going to go to sleep, so that by the time it's kicked in, I'm asleep already. And if it's going to give me a weird psychoactive green thing that I'm not so comfortable with because it's too strong, you're probably going to confuse that for a natural dream onset anyway, and it won't be that weird. You're burying the strangeness of the high within the potential weirdness of a dreamscape. So that's the way you want to do it at the beginning, okay? Then...
Okay, so can I... So after 3 days of this, sorry, because that's, you know, your cancer's not cured.
No,
it's not an issue. But what you're actually saying is after 3 days of pure oil, that you're actually experiencing a change in the pain sensation. Whatever's happening, and we're not suggesting any kind of significant physiological healing at this point, but in whatever's happening, the pain messages that you're receiving have been modified for you to be able to function better. Is that what you're
reading that? Because that's exactly correct.
Yeah, I'm a geek. Sorry. And this is really important, Alan. What you're describing.
This is amazing stuff.
Well, just before you answer just before the next question. So sorry, because you're so right on point. I want to close this point out. Yeah, 3 pinheads probably comes to a grand total of 1/2 of 1 grain of rice. This is how I started. This wasn't exactly how you want to do it now, and I've improved things and stuff. 3 tiny pinheads spread over 75, 80 hours brought me far more relief than a spring and summer and autumn full of frequently popping over-the-counter prescription drug, or as they say in England, the chemist kind of over-the-counter medications of pain relievers, of muscle relaxants, of all kinds of things that I have been gobbling up and spending too much money on and feeling too shitty. 3 pinheads of this outweighed an entire spring, summer, fall of that horse shit. and I didn't need any additional pain. And from that point on, man, that was the last time I had morphine until my second crash about a year later.
That's amazing, man. I went to Oregon and got my mother off of about a handful of 12 different medications. And the first time she actually got a nice head going, she was just like a different person. I mean, she was happy. She was dealing with the pain. And I mean, it was just, like you said, it changes you. It's amazing.
It is.
Question, guys, real quick, to you, Alan, and to you guys that have also made these things or have access to them. Okay, in the processing of making this full-on Rick Simpson oil, because I've never made it. I've only gotten it there in Oregon over the counter or through the dispensaries.
Yep.
And you can get it recreationally, but it's far more potent if you get it medically. So once I got my mother the medical part, I saw the difference. Yeah. So I assumed in the processing that there was the deep carboxylation process taking place. Yeah. Because I thought you actually didn't get the psychoactive reaction unless you remove that water molecule. So does the actual processing in that long term remove that molecule?
Yeah. Yep, it does. It transmutes it, or whatever the chemist term is. It changes it. For those of you, it alters it. It chemically alters it from THCA to THC, and then you're good to go. So when you smoke a joint, say you're going to smoke a joint, apparently what it is, and this is why I don't understand edibles or how they work necessarily, but when you smoke a joint, this weed, this grass has THCA in it, and then the heat from the fire from smoking it heats it up to the point where it instantly transmutes it from THCA to THC. And then that's what gets you high when you smoke it. But unfortunately, when you smoke it, you've also burned a lot of it off. Whereas
that's why the vaporizers are so amazing.
There you go. So you get all of it. And I know people out there, if you're listening and you don't want to get a vaporizer because you think it's expensive, just make the one-time investment in a quality vaporizer, and you're going to triple the value and the distance of your and you'll still smoke a joint once in a while, but you're going to triple the value of your the duration of how long your cannabis supply lasts, because it's so much more effective. And then when you're done with it, it's not even burnt. It's just dried out like an autumn leaf, all tiny, and you put it in a jar and you keep it over time, and eventually you can get a little more THC boost out of that when you grind that up and put it into some cookie dough and make some tasty little cookies like that. I mean, it's a very generous gift to vaporize it over and over again. It's a very generous plant.
We have a guy in chat. Well, can we?
I was going to say that. Yes, we can.
Go in chat. Go in chat saying bullshit.
What's that?
So, elaborate on what the bullshit is. THC, Anthony. I think he's. Do you know what he's on about? Well.
That's basically it. He's got some different opinion about this processing, and I think it's similar to what I'm saying there with the deep carboxylation, removing that water up front so that any edible you make with it after that is going to increase its activity. It's going to increase the availability without.
Are we calling the oil an edible though? Are we calling the oil?
Well, I mean, I'm not saying. I'm just saying that because that's usually the way it's being consumed is orally. I know that some people actually smoke that oil if they can vaporize that oil, or they recommended a lot of different ways you could do it depending on your health and what your issues were. So
maybe that's a
we're just trying to learn as many ways as we can, and it seems like THC Anthony actually has some information. Maybe we can get him on a little bit later, and
that'd be great. Yeah. I'd like to be. Yeah, it's a shifting science. I was never really 100% behind it, man. I'm just telling you, like, I did step by step of what this guy, Rick Simpson, had.
Exactly. And look, if you're not a success story, Alan, I don't know who he is, brother, for sure. Yeah. You are a walking, talking success story.
Alan, firstly, somebody in chat who makes an unqualified, actually understandable statement isn't worth worrying about until it comes back to something that maybe is salient to what and important to what we're talking about. But
toss it out.
To pull it back, because there's a lot of really important information, and your testimony is really important. And I just want to get it just to the point. So you've gone from a few pinheads, and you're, I assume, starting to double up on that basis.
Yeah.
Over that time, and you're are you maintaining the dose only at night, or when do you start to? Well, what do you do in terms of dosing?
Okay, so we'll walk you right through that now.
By the way, folks, you're listening to Iron Realm Media. It's Flat Friday. Thanks for listening.
We got a text.
That's okay. Are we on the air still?
Yeah, go.
Okay. All right, so here is now the dosage that you want to do, and I did a different, earlier punked down version of it. By the time I got to doing this again a second time, about 15, 18 months later, this is how you do it. So never mind the tiny pinheads. That was just a beacon for me to go, wow, this stuff really works. So that was great for me, and I took it up in a really slow manner. But you can feel safe and comfortable with this well thought out dosage chart. Here we go. You can practically memorize it, but you can also download it. World's first Rick Simpson oil 30-day dosage chart. Here we go. On day 1, you consume enough oil to replicate the size and amount of 1/2 of 1 grain of uncooked rice. We're talking white rice, not wild rice that's 1.5 inches long. Just the regular kind of grain of rice. That's probably, I don't know, 1/2 centimeter maybe, like a small grain of rice that you haven't cooked yet. You take 1/2 of that on day 1, about a half hour or an hour. I find this is my own style methodology, about a half an hour or an hour before you go to sleep, to help you go to sleep and to experience any kind of harsh weirdnesses while you don't want to be thinking about that, maybe while you're trying to deal with your other emotional process of, holy shit, I got cancer. So maybe you don't want to be high and freaking out with that. So you take it just before you go to bed and off you go to sleep, and it's great. 1/2 a grain of uncooked rice. And you do that every single day for 1 week. So let's say Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you're taking 1/2 a grain of rice nightly just before bed, every single night, 1/2 a grain only. And you do this by grabbing an actual grain of rice. Come on, you got that in your kitchen, or your friends do, or somebody does. Grab yourself a little handful of rice as a visual aid. Look at it. Put it on a table. Understand that when you use this oil, you want to be peeling it off glass like the gentleman says with a razor blade or something. Every single drop of this stuff counts. So you want to imitate by your eye, because it doesn't matter. It's not like a hard pharmaceutical where it's 25 milligrams exactly of this and 75 milligrams exactly of that. My 1/2 a grain of rice might be a little bit smaller or bigger than yours. It doesn't matter. You're just getting started. It's okay. It's not going to overdose, and it's not going to be not enough. So you take 1/2 a grain of rice before you go to sleep every single day, and you looked at a grain of rice, and you could tell, and you don't imagine what you think of 1/2 a grain of rice looks like. You have rice, you put it on the table, you cut your little amount that you need to emulate that size, and you do that, and that's how you know you're doing 1/2 a grain of rice every single day for a week. And then the next week, exactly the same thing, but now you're doing a whole grain of rice. And you do the whole grain of rice, but you've already built up your tolerance, and the freaky kind of strange stuff of the dreams is not so much of a thing anymore, and you kind of get it. And you kind of get it, and it's okay, and you're getting used to it. And slowly, your biological casing that you're walking around in there, that you're powering through this life, is starting to understand, and so therefore not freak out about what's going on. So 7 days of solid 1/2 a grain of rice. On the 8th day, now you're doing a whole grain of rice. And you do that for 4 days. 4 days. And you do a grain of rice, a grain of rice, a grain of rice, a grain of rice. So by now, you've had 1, 2, 3, 3.5, 4.5, 5.5, 6, 7. You've had 7.5 grains of rice. Look at that with your little sample of rice. You've had 7.5 grains of rice in a week and a half. Okay, so that's hardly anything, but it's also a ton, because like I told you, when I only had 3 pinheads, my pain was going away. It's ridiculous how well this works, and I don't know exactly why. Now you've done 4 days of an entire grain of rice. On the next day, you're going to do 4 grains. You're going to do 4 days of 2 grains of rice. Now you've doubled it. Now this is kind of funny, because this is exactly how prostate cancer works. It lurks, it lurks, it lurks, it lurks, it lurks. Then it gets a little bit bigger and it kind of doubles. And then when it starts doubling, it's out of control. Once you start doing the math of doubling things, before you know it, you're at 1 million. And if that's a tumor, you're going to die. So you've got 7 days of half a grain, 4 days of 1 grain, 4 days of 2 grains, 4 days of 4 grains of rice. And then you're going to move from that into 4 days of 8 grains of rice. And your body is tolerating the doubling, just like it would be in the reverse of getting worse and worse and worse with the doubling of the cancer multiplying. The methodology of taking this stuff in reverses and emulates the methodology of the cancer itself, prostate cancer specifically, spiraling on out. So that's pretty amazing. It took me a long time to realize that. And if it's just a coincidence, it's still fucking amazing. So now you got 4 days of 8 grains of rice, and then you have 4 days of 16 grains of rice. Still, that's not a lot when you look at it, right? It's like it's like a tip of a teaspoon kind of thing. And then the next day after those 4 days, you double that, and you're at 32 grains of rice, which equals 1 gram. It's about a syringe, about 3 inches long. It's about a vitamin pill that's completely empty. It's very easy to deal with, and you do that. And then from that point, so it took you like 1, 2, 3, almost 4 weeks to climb yourself up to being able to tolerate 1 gram a day. And here's where the weird phenomena is of this. At the very, very beginning of all of this, you feel, or I did, and some other folks have spoken with, you do feel kind of spacey and weird and messed up, and it's kind of strange. And as long as you realize what's going on, you're okay, because you're taking these tiny amounts of oil. But by the time you're slamming down 1 gram a day and you built your tolerance, I thought I was going to need to break that into 2, 3, 4 times a day, like take an intermediate thing. No, I would just get up in the morning, slam the thing, I'm fine. And you get tolerating this stuff like it's nothing. Like you're not even impaired or anything. And guess what happens after a little while? I couldn't even get the pleasure of getting high anymore. I couldn't vape. I wasn't even getting that pleasure because my tolerance was so high. And then I was just like bang, 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 and keep taking it until 90 days is reached. So again, 60 grams takes 90 days because the first gram is slowly building up in tiny pinheads and then half grains and then grains and etc. And it takes you pretty much a month to go from 0 to 1 gram daily.
No, on that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Alan. On that's why I brought costing up earlier on. What I found was the necessary treatment was to almost, and the point you alluded to at the end kind of explains why there was a load left at the end, but was factored for 90 grams. So the 60 gram treatment wasn't included in the titration upwards. And what was factored in as well was
that's the whole amount. That's the entire consumption amount. 60 grams taken in over the course of 90 days.
I'm only describing what we did. Maybe it's a little bit overzealous. But what we took the option. I had a little look into it, and maybe it's probably pertinent to explain why. You alluded to earlier in terms of 25 or whatever dose. The dosage really isn't equivalent, even relevant. The mechanism of action, as I understand it, and we alluded to the University of Madrid stuff earlier, is it's about absolutely saturating the system and all the cells within the system to activate their cannabinoid receptors. And in doing so, what these cells do is self-analyze, and upon self-recognition that they are cancerous, self-destruct. But this is only achievable.
Apoptosis.
Yeah. Cell apoptosis is exact point. But it appears that it requires full body saturation for this to take effect. And that's why when idiots go, "Why don't you smoke a spliff and you cure cancer?" That's why that's nonsense. Smoking gives a very quick initial hit, but also a quick clearance and a quick metabolism of the drug out. It doesn't allow for what this treatment is, which is, as I describe, a full body saturation to ensure every cell is being rewritten. And I just want to go to a little bit of testimony on this, Alan, that it is, I mean, your testimony is amazing because it shows a full body reaction. It's not just cancer. It helps rewrite a lot of faulty cells. But my dad went through that and had the urinary problem. It's nowhere in your league, mate, you know.
I'm sorry.
But the one thing I would say, we went on holiday to celebrate, me and him, and we had a 5-hour car journey, and it was only towards the end.
You have reached the voicemail box of 3603550.
You sad man. You sad man. You sad little man. Sorry, Alan. That's a little.
No, I think that's us actually.
That was me, Adam. That was.
Right. Sorry, I was a little emotional there, mate. I was sharing.
Don't worry, just carry on.
After 5 hours, basically. 5 hours. Yeah, he didn't need a pee. He didn't need a pee, you know, and because I embarked on this not knowing, being a smart-ass pharmacist that was, you know, would this work? And outside of that, and it's great to hear your testimony because it really does qualify a lot of what we did and help confirm it, that there's other real people I've spoke to that experience it. But my dad was also suffering with kind of cataracts and was really struggling with his eyesight. And at the beginning of the treatment, there was a big chandelier, I don't know, 10, 11 lights on it, and all he could see was just a blob of light. Right. Halfway through, he could start to see there was 9, 10, 11 lights on there. And when we're on this trip, he could actually see through the headrest, and he said to me, son, I can see all the hairs on the back of your wife's head through the headrest, you know, the little hole in the headrest. And it was absolutely, and I think we have to understand, I think there's a lot, as well as getting rid of the cancer cells, it's almost like it's a rewriting of the body to restructure itself and start again. It's a strange.
Hey, listen, I really want to jump on that. I really want to jump on that. You're close to finish, so let me know.
Yeah, I'm done, bro.
Okay. So at this point, everyone listening, including the guys on the show and everyone else, I want to point out that this is, I don't even know what these fellows look like. We've exchanged a few emails back and forth to just, logistically line up this interview. It's given an option of several different Fridays. This is the one. And like I said before, with the notion that you're saddled with, which is people who want to attack you and say, everyone knows you can't cure cancer by smoking a joint. No one's saying that. And what you said right there, what you just said right there, is exactly what I tell people. You don't cure cancer. You don't cure it. The wrong approach is to attack it. The wrong approach is to treat it in such a way that you are going to blast it, or cut it all out, or burn it out, or poison it out. The best approach is to understand that you're not going to cure that disease ever. What you're going to do is recondition the biological field of existence that it takes place in other words, your body. You're going to render your body into a different overall homeostasis that cannot host the disease. Similar to if you had a Velcro something or other and it sticks on there every time they bring them together. And then one time you change the scope of one of those two planes, either the hook side or the fuzzy catch side, and you flatten one of them out. Well, if you change that topography there, those two pieces of Velcro, they're not going to stick together anymore. And if you render your body to the point where you're pounding it with this oil, to the point where these chemical actions that do so take place, and I can give you lots of websites where to go to see this thing, alters it and changes it to the point where these, like you say, once you're fully saturated and you've filled it on up, these cells start freaking out. They don't know what to do, and they literally kill themselves. It's called cellular suicide in generic terms, which is a fun thing to say when you're talking about a cancer cell. But the official name of it is apoptosis, which is I really love that word because it's fun to say. You can be silly with it, and ultimately it means this enemy of yours is actually taking its own life. You're rendering yourself inhospitable for the disease to hang on. And that's not the approach of Western medicine. The approach of Western medicine is to attack, cut, burn, slash, remove. And, when I had a dog once, she had cancer in her knee, 11 years old. Terrible thing. It was a great dog, loved her so much, as did many of my friends. Phoenix was a great Doberman gal. And she had a knee cancer thing at 11. And the doctor at that time said, yeah, if I cut this off her leg, now you got an 11-year-old dog trying to heal from this amputation. That's not easy.
And having 3 legs, that's not easy when you're 11. Plus, we don't know, and we won't be able to tell. Probably the cancer spread beyond the leg, and it's in the rest of the body anyway, so why even try to recover from... This guy tried to talk me out of surgery. Can you imagine? I mean, he could have made some money doing it. But he explained to me it wasn't worthwhile. So this stuff could be anywhere at any time. So you don't want to bother trying to chase it around with poisons, chasing it around with a scalpel. You want to completely biologically re-render yourself into a different position. And while people think that's nuts, that's crazy, you're lying, you're making this up, it's bullshit, roll back the tape of this show and go back to how I had metastases in my bones. I was falling apart. They were fizzing away. I lost all this weight. I'm down to 135. I'm back up to 170 pounds now. I don't have any of these issues.
Can I stop you again there, Alan? Because, you know, again,
it's
the significance of what you just said there may be missed. You know, when you described the metastases earlier and the how you know, the fizzing, this is a dissolvement of your skeletal structure. It's an invasion and a destruction of all your bones. Yeah. So, what the hell happened then? Are you left with holes in your bones and go. Sorry.
Okay. Exactly what happened is, so remember, I'm going into this mess as 190 pounds, 6 foot tall. Pretty good shape in my life. A little tiny bit of a tummy, but I'm working on getting rid of that. But basically, I'm in pretty good shape. I'm in the best shape, the biggest and strongest I'd ever been, actually, in my life. So I'm starting with this. And I guess I could have maintained that had none of this happened. I was quite enjoying the routine. And that anything more than that for me would have been overweight, because I'm more of a slender frame anyway. So 190 is about it, and that's all. 190 pounds. So that's, what is that in stone? That's 14 pounds each. So like 10 stone and and 50 more pounds on top of that for the Brits. Anyway, so that's how big I was at the time. So then you're going through this phase of metastases, and this is how you're going to die. It just keeps fizzing away, and you're getting weaker and weaker. And you've seen people lose all this weight, and you've seen folks. You've seen cases of fellas that are like a 240-pound beer-drinking construction worker, and by the time he unfortunately slides out of existence, he might be an 85-pound, very tightly stretched skin over very bony face, barely even recognize the guy. You're literally dissolving away from the inside. So when all of that stops, which is what I call arresting metastases, and when all of that starts to rebuild, which is what I call reversing metastases, it's true that I went through that. And it's also true that as much as I've regained everything that I've had before, except for some of the urological damage that took place at the worst time before the cure was upon me, before the diagnosis was upon me, and I deal with that shit, so what are you going to do? Hoo-hoo. But anyway, when you get to that point, and you fizzed away so much, okay, I'll get into how I arrested and reversed it, because this is also key. But just understand at this point, I've arrested and reversed it. It's not fizzing away anymore, and it's slowly solidifying, and I guess rebuilding to the point where I'm not as dense and as heavy as I was before. Now I'm like at 170 pounds. I got down to 135, but now I'm at 170 pounds, and I'll never get to be 190 pounds again unless I become overweight, because my frame got smaller. My height stayed pretty much the same. I might have lost about a centimeter or half a centimeter, but my actual size of all of the bones and everything, they did shrink. And now we'll fast forward to the very, very recent present. My new, cool, better doctor who was really on board with a lot more of this than the first guy that I had that was a disaster downtown. The second guy said to me 2 visits ago, and I go, or maybe it's 3 visits, I go every 3 months now to get blood checks, right, just to make sure everything's good. And it has been, and it's been amazing, and he can't believe how good it is. But a couple of times ago, I said, why is it, this very question, how is it that I was able to regain? He said, your CAT scan, right, if you look at my CAT scan, he said to me, it looks like you're a leopard. The bones look like they're a leopard. Because what happens is this. When the bones deteriorate, as I say, with this metastasis, and when they grow and heal, like when you break your leg and then it heals, alkylytic phosphatic acid is released, and this is the panic attack that the bones are going through. This is the action, the alkylating phosphatic acid. You want to have that between 90 and 135 points. I don't know the validity of this. It's, you know, these are the numbers you want to be in. This is the way you have blood pressure numbers and you have cholesterol numbers you want. This is your alkylating phosphatic acid. You want to have that at all times when you're healthy, between 90 and 135. When I got busted, it was up and around 12, both times, it was up and around 12 and 1300. Now that either means that your bones are fizzing away like crazy, or your bones are mending away like crazy. It just indicates rapid, noticeable activity of change and release and rebuilding and whatever within the bones themselves at a higher speed than normally just growing from being a kid and then aging into an adult. So your bones are at play there. And so I lost a lot of my bones. They fizzed away. And then it stopped. And then I started to rebuild. But you're only going to get to such a level. Man, maybe if I had stage 1, stage 2 cancer and I didn't fizz away as much, then it wouldn't have been, you know, as much of an issue. But this doctor now says that my CAT scan, I look like a cheetah because basically the topography of my skeleton it fizzes away in little spots. It's like having potholes on the road. And so now the potholes have been filled in, but you can tell that's a pothole. That's not a regular piece of road. You can tell where there was a hole there, and then they poured some tar in it, the city or whatever. So my skeleton is now, it looks like a cheetah, he says. It's riddled with these little darker spots because it's the scarring of a bone that was integrous in the first place, fizzing away, having a pocket there, and then refilling, but to a lesser degree.
So there's been a rebuilding of bone mass to fill the pothole, as you say. And your overall bone density, is that returned within, as you would describe, you know, normal limits?
Yes, 100%. But
and these calluses, are they of significant different composition? Has he said anything? Could you find out about that? That's
I'm
really.
Sorry, I missed the first part of what you want me to find out about. What was
the potholes, the calluses that have filled? Are they? Is there some information about what their composition is? Is it?
Well, just bone, like regrowing, like bone material. Because what you've done is you've stopped the cellular disruption, like we said earlier with the apoptosis. It's starting to freak out now. It can't deal with the fact that this cannabis chemical reaction is kicking its ass. So they start to kill themselves. They start to die off. Because if you just leave it go and you're going to die, they just go nuts. They go out of control. But you've changed what it is that they've been feeding on. And so they can't feed on it in that same way anymore.
Hey, Alan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Do you need to get a drink, or maybe
I wouldn't mind one.
Get a cup of coffee?
We don't take commercial breaks. We take gravity breaks here on Flat Earth.
Okay. We're going to weave into that, too, because there are some things I'd like to know about that. I'm going to ask my friend here, if it's possible, if I can get a glass of water, because I'm kind of laid in here with my dog. And so I'm going to get a glass of water.
Nice. What kind of dog you got, man?
I'm good to go. What's that? What kind of dog?
Yeah.
Oh, half French Bulldog, half Boston Terrier.
Nice.
Funny as hell, makes me laugh every day. Floyd.
Alan, I'd like to say that I've had I've just been, it's been brilliant to listen to you. Your energy,
just
your information, everything. It's just absolutely fantastic. We're going to have to get you back on, you know, on a nice, relaxed podcast and go through this stuff. It's been brilliant. Cheers.
Okay.
Alan.
Well, I'll tell you something.
We're not leaving. We're just taking a
we're not leaving.
Taking a water break.
Are we going to have a bit more?
Thanks a lot, Alan.
Maybe move on after the break and that, because if we are this, I just, as John alluded to there, mate. As you might have gathered, I'm a cocky know-it-all, and when I started on this journey with my dad, and even now, I don't believe the doctors. I don't believe that when they tell me he's absolutely fine, we don't want to see him. And outside of that, you know, as somebody personally, it's been freaking brilliant, pal, to talk to somebody that confirms that what's happened to my dad is real. You know, and
yeah,
if
isn't that something
there,
to get validation?
real, man. This is real.
Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I knew I was going to be in for the fight, but listen, I want to clear up a couple of notions right away. I've heard a lot of things about how brave I am, and I appreciate that. I get appreciation for telling the story, but when I first started to go through this whole thing, it wasn't how brave I am. Okay, I was scared shitless. I thought I was going to die. And once I realized that, hey, I'm going to try this cannabis and I'm going to do this and maybe it works and I'll give it a shot. And I started to get positive results. I wanted to tell you that I got from my 700 PSA on the diagnosis date of November 20th, which was terrible. By the time I'd been doing this oil, the 3 pinheads, and then slowly advancing it, and not exactly the same way I've described with this Rick Simpson dosage chart, which I didn't know if it even existed yet, or if it did, I didn't know about it. But I just started to slowly increase a little bit more. And by the time I went to go see the specialist doctor, who was 5 weeks after the initial diagnosis, and he's checking me out, he gave me 10 or 12 months to live. And at that point, so this is December 27th or so, 2013, and he said, you know, I said, well, so what are we going to do? So now understand this. I've been riding this 5-wave zone of improvement where I've got more mobility. I'm feeling pretty good. I don't know where I'm going to end up, if it's going to be all amazing, but I can tell absolutely I got a much better lease on life than the crash that brought me to the diagnosis in the first place. And I know this because I'm not taking painkillers and I'm having fun. And once in a while, I do get a little bit high by accident or on purpose because I vaped on top of it and everything else and be a little bit silly. And then we get into the notion of how people shit on the fact that you're being silly and laughing when you're fucking high. But guess what? When you got cancer and you laugh at something that's supposed to be serious and come on, pull yourself together and don't be silly and don't do this. Hey, man, don't you fucking get in the way of me manufacturing endorphins, because that's another key to try to turn around and get out of here. So you take the giggle and you nurse it and you enjoy it as long as you want, and whether you're in traffic court or anywhere else. That is a chemical reaction right there. They say laughter in the medicine that cures all, blah, 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 and all this kind of hokey kind of sayings. But it is true that when you're having a great time...
There's more to it than that, Alan, isn't there?
Lots more to it.
That's right. So
and it's so frustrating for people that don't understand that. I have to say, personally, my mother, through this healing process, once she started feeling better and getting over her neuropathy pain, which is nowhere near cancer pain, I understand that, but she lives in agony. And my brother has been, you know, he was the DARE generation, and he has been so hard to deal with sometimes with it. He's letting it work, but he's giving her a hard time when she isn't acting like herself. And it's like, so you'd rather have her upset in her room, locked away from the world? That's the mom you want? The happy, cutting up, silly mom? I mean, it's so, yeah, I'm sorry, I'm getting upset.
That's just a result of the poor, unfortunate unfolding through history and time, a manifestation of nothing more than ill-perceived morals, okay? Like it's a crutch or something. And it's like, hey, I'm sick as fuck. If I have a reason to laugh, I am not going to work at any level to try to prevent the laugh to appear to be more mature or whatever the hell somebody else's perception of me is in this moment. I understand that when I'm having a great time, having a laugh, when I'm coming out of a stage 4 cancer wave and it's been just a year of shit and your family's falling apart and everything else and all this shit going on, I am not going to spend half a second trying to stop myself from laughing about anything. That moment of feeling or something, that's a win on the journey of the day. You know, you're doing like a multi-phase, months-long scavenger hunt, and every win is a win, and you celebrate it. So if I get a giggle out of something, and for some inexplicable reason I laugh for 10 minutes instead of the normal one and a half, I'm taking it. You know.
Hey, Alan, what would you say to others?
Oh my God.
Alan, what would you say to others? Let's say someone today was diagnosed with stage 4 prostate cancer. What would you say to them?
I would say this. Wow, that's brutal. You must be scared. I've been there. If that were me, and I was getting that news again myself, I know I would start getting on this oil immediately. As soon as I can get it, as soon as I can get home, tomorrow morning, I'll start cooking it. I'll start making it, and I'll take it on day 1. I'll take it on day 2, 3, 5 because once you get diagnosed, and I know we're talking to 3 different regions here, Canada, the States, and England, and this is going to be different for everywhere. I don't pretend to know everyone's health system, Australia, Belgium, whatever. As soon as you get the diagnosis, conceivably, you're not going to be in my position where there was no option. They offered me nothing in the way of being able to remedy this. I was, quote, unquote, too far gone for chemotherapy, too far gone for radiation or surgery. And I would say, you just start taking this oil immediately, because as soon as your follow-up for your prostate cancer, whatever thing you got diagnosed with, they're not going to look at you for 2, 3, 5 days, maybe a week, maybe 10 or 3 weeks. And maybe it's a couple of months. And sometimes if you only got stage 1 or stage 2.
This brings me on to... sorry, carry on.
I'm just trying to say, like, the lesser advanced it is, if it's a stage 1 or stage 2 maybe, or even precancerous, that's the longer you're going to wait to get someone cracking on what's going on with you. And but that could be to your favor, because I know so many people. I've come, having gone into this, I meet lots of people who are patients, and we've all got stories of this that I didn't used to know before. And I've heard so many times from people, they were diagnosed and they were told some things that might be happening, and then they just live their lives taking painkillers until they go back in. And if you have stage 1 or you're precancerous or stage 2, and sometimes even stage 3, you'd be surprised how long you're needed to wait in the queue, in the lineup of trying to get serviced as a patient, because the more dire you are, the quicker it is. So in my case, 5 weeks. If you're not so dire, you're precancerous or 1 or 2, you might have to wait 2, 3, 4 months. This course only takes 3 months to do.
That would lead me on to my final question, which is slightly touchy, but if this was to happen again, would you bother with? Well, it's a 2-part question. Would you bother with any of the conventional medicines or the treatments that actually told you had cancer, or do you think that cancer is actually a disease, or is it just a self-defense mechanism of the body? Is it something that the body is naturally doing? It's not a disease. It's not something that's killing you. It's something that's trying to protect you from something that is killing you. I don't know what you feel about that.
Well, I've never heard that question before, so that's the first impression I have. If it's trying to protect me from something, how is it dissolving away my bones from the inside and leaving me to the point where if I haven't taken this drastic action, I probably would have been dead by Christmas or maybe October?
I can fill you in on that one, guys. That's one of the more modern genetic theories, that it's actually a regressive gene. So what the postulation is that, and I'm not advocating this, but here we go.
You're just saying
in the primordial days, most cells were cancerous, because the thing about cancerous cells is they're extremely resilient to most things. That's what they're tough to kill. They're a lot tougher to kill than human standard tissue cells. Now the point is that the theory is that it's thought that now. What they're suggesting is when the environment was harsh back then, that's how cells were. When we pollute our bodies in certain ways, be that emotionally or toxicologically or dietary, whatever, it's this imbalance that generates this regressive gene back to a cancerous state that is the trigger for cancer. And it's actually a survival mechanism and a warning of your polluting the system. It's the body's natural defense for extreme pollution.
Well, if I can add to
so
that,
how would it defend me? What would be the defense, though? I just keep on dying, and it protected me from living longer?
Okay, so it's put it simply, it's an ultimate cellular response to survival. It's not an organism's response
Have we lost everyone? Who have we lost? Can anyone hear me? I'd say we've lost me then.
Terms of what you're actually getting is an actual rebuilding and a return to structural strength of maybe not the full dimensions, but a structural return, and as you alluded to earlier, a return to full bone mass, which is more significant for structure than.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting stuff, and I'm glad you raised it, because that's what I would call a left turn that I didn't see coming. I haven't thought about that. I don't know anything about it, but if you do have some information to lead me off down that road of research, I'm certainly open and welcome to do it. Listen, I can only tell this journey the way it happened to me, and the way when I started to add cannabis, things started to get better, and I got great results. This is my journey. I hope it happens the same way for anybody else, but I realize it doesn't always work. I don't know exactly why it works, but this brings me to the concept of the placebo. If someone takes a medicine and that thing heals that person due to the medicinal reaction, whether it's pharmaceutical or otherwise, this oil or some other thing, the kratom or whatever that is, I'd like to get into that. If you take something that does that, good for you, and it makes you feel better, and if you can accredit the improvement in feeling to that chemical compound, that pill, that kratom, that cannabis, that morphine, if you can understand that, then great, then it works. But if I also get pain relief and I start to regenerate and I get my life back from a guaranteed diagnosis of you're fucking dead in a year, and I get to do whatever I want after that, and I was just taking a placebo, then what's the problem with that? Who cares if it's a placebo? You know what I mean? If a glass of water does me as much good as a shot of insulin to get rid of who cares? If that's something that my mind got tricked into that I thought was going to work, who cares? That's great, isn't it? That's great. That means you don't have the side effect of a terrible other drug or something like that. So I don't even care if it winds up being only a placebo. All I know is I was slated for destruction. I felt the pain of this and the agony and the decay and everything else for long enough to know that once I turned a corner, I turned a corner. And if it turns out it's only a placebo or some other kind of reaction or whatever, I'm good with that. I'd like to know what it is, but I don't care.
Sorry, I got kicked out for a second there, but that ties in. Well, I'd like to ask you what your thoughts on homeopathy are.
I don't know much about it. I've done it before.
It's very much, as you were saying about a placebo sort of thing. Lots of people say, this is absolutely horseshit. It's diluted down to absolutely nothing. But there are people that take these, homeopathic remedies and get benefit from them. As you're saying, why would anyone have a problem with that? It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I have taken them before. I have been to a homeopath before. In other words, I tried that. I had this all started for me years and years ago. Was when I had my very first problem that really messed me up in my life. I was about 20 years old, and I experienced very incredible back pains. And I went to the doctors, and they weren't really too sure what it was, and they just kept prescribing painkillers. And I went to the chiropractic. Now, because I'd never heard, I didn't know what it was, and it was another alternative. Now, I know there's all people that can say bad things about chiropractic and everything else. It doesn't matter. I did do it. And I did find in there by this particular doctor, whose name always made me laugh. His name was Jack Factor. and I used to call him Jack Factor, the chiropractic back cracker. And he helped me a little bit to get past some pains and stuff that these doctor guys weren't able to do. And I gave me some exercises and gave me some stretches and stretching certain muscles like the psoas muscle in a certain way. And he just approached my issue from a different angle than than the medical guys. And then I was able to maintain these series of stretches and things and rolls and stuff. And then I wasn't having that problem anymore. So I thought, well, that works. Now, maybe they do break your neck and cause nerve damage and stuff like that. It's just not been my experience when I was 20 or so. So I was always open to alternative types of kinds of healing in the first place. And then I've heard of things that are terrible, that are not a good idea, and probably are more fake than others compared to something like a psychic surgery or whatever, pulling chicken guts and giblets out of people's body and pretending it's theirs. And then there's people that says, no, that's absolutely true. I haven't done all that. But I've looked into the chiropractic, I've looked into the holistic, I've looked into cranial, I don't know, something to do with your cranial sacrum therapy. That's what it is. And then there's different kinds of things. So I've tried different things, see how it goes. So I don't know how any of that is nailed down or not. But I was at the end of the world with this thing, and there was nothing else. This is the thing I meant to tell you earlier about bravery, and I want to get this in before we end. And I don't know when we are, but it's on the top of my mind right now. I don't consider myself to be brave because I went into this petrified, and I went into this with the mindset of keeping it all a secret. I didn't want anyone to know I had it. I didn't want additional sympathies. I didn't want people going, "Oh, are you okay? Oh, do you want to sit over here? Oh, is that okay? You want me to move that for you?" I didn't want all that. I didn't want the focus and the negative attention. Oh, let me get the door for you. You probably can't move. I didn't want any of that. And my plan was this. I got cancer. Now I'm trying to get out of it. If this cannabis shit really works, that'll be great. And then I'll be good. And then I'll go back to work and I'll keep my fucking mouth shut because I don't want to lose my job and I don't want to find out. I don't want cops to find out and I don't want anybody to know. And I just want to get out of this. And if I don't, then I guess I die and I tried and that's the end of that. But it was a private issue for me, right? Except for the person who helped me obtain the green and a couple other people and the gal I was, in a relationship with at the time. Nobody else really knew about this. I just wanted to get out. And when I started to get this improvement over December and then January, February, and then by April of 2014, I'm doing fantastically well. You would have thought at that point, now I'm back to normal, everything's good. But the more I got through this, by the time I got to like February, March, and I realized, wait a minute, this is really doing something fantastically well. I have improved so much. I am having so much of a better year. By April of that year, on my way to when I was supposed to be dying, I wound up taking my children to a water slide theme park and running up and down the staircases all day to go down there. And a lot of people at stage 4 cancer, 4 or 5 months later, they don't get to do that. So they're going down a slide, not a water slide. So I knew something was up. But this fearful guy that didn't want to tell anyone I was sick and didn't want to suffer the stigma and didn't want to do all that. And I wanted to keep it quiet and just get it done and behind me and moving the fuck on, just forget about that. Well, guess what? When I realized that this stuff was kicking in so hard and things were really happening, I was completely without the ability to keep it a secret because that would be thoroughly unfair. If I can share this information with one person and turn around their situation the same way mine was been able to turn around, I considered it amoral and criminal of myself to sit upon this knowledge that I had gained. So I wasn't even at a liberty to keep it a secret. Once I started to realize how well it was working, I was like, tough about your privacy, tough about the fact that you want anybody to know about this, tough about the fact that you're aware that sometimes people can criticize and make fun and doubt and try to call you out as being a liar or a manipulator or whatever they're going to do. Suffer the slings and arrows was far less important to me than the honesty of the fact that this fucking shit works. At least it worked for me. Maybe it can work for you. And specifically, if you want to opt over chemo and all these other things, go for it. But I was literally given no choice, okay? Nothing was going to happen. They said,
Alan,
there's nothing else to do.
You talked about slings and arrows. Can I ask what your religious beliefs are, if any?
Okay. Well, I believe that a lot of people are Christians, and I believe that a lot of people are Muslim, and I believe that a lot of people are Catholic, and I believe a lot of people have got it wrong. I believe a lot of people believe in a lot of things, and I believe there's not enough of a consensus, and I believe that lack of consensus was deliberately fomented to keep us separated and at each other's throats, so the guys that are really pulling shit off are completely and constantly distracting us with infighting, and they keep on subdividing and conquering and subdividing and conquering. Listen, they've got it so divided now that in the United States of America, the left itself, the litigious, progressive fighting left itself, love it or hate it, I'm not going to get into that. We all just agree that it does so exist. The progressive left of the United States, this is a niche slice of society, the progressive left, and you would think it was a big old pain in the ass to the right wing, and it is. But isn't it amazing, for example, that the very hard left-wing, campus society, safe space kind of people, don't say things that'll offend me, got to recognize every single gender, that slice of the left is now bifurcated into two pieces. On one side, you got Antifa, and on the other side, you've got these, these other sub-splinter of protest people, and they're fighting with each other, And so you got tons of sub-factions on the left fighting with other sub-factions on the left. You got people on the right side and the right wing, and there's evangelical Christian right wings, and then there's just old school conservative right wings like Dwight Eisenhower, and then you got guys that are right wing like the far right KKK hood wearing guys. So you got 9 different kinds of right, and you got 57 different languages, and nobody can get on the same page. And these religions, and I'm not saying that there isn't some kind of spirituality, but these artificially constructed religions to keep different people in different mindsets all the time at each other's throats seems to be doing a great job at distracting from the agenda rolling out by the few people that are actually carrying that off.
So I take it you've got no religion then?
I don't have any religion. I'm trying to process the thing that I don't fully understand because to be quite honest with you, I'm coming from being raised as a Presbyterian, whatever the hell that is, and I got baptized as such, and then I didn't go to church, and I was completely without any belief in any. That was all nonsense and fairy tales, and then later on, I got to the point where, and because of this whole sickness and everything, and turning it around, there's definitely some kind of energy that create. Like, how does a leaf just keep on going and unfolding and all this? There's just way too much going on that I can't understand. And to be honest with you, I haven't pondered these greater things because I never really focused on that aspect so much until I got to this dire state. And then I had to put most of my focus on just pulling my own ass out of the fire, never mind being religious minded and taking my piece to my maker. I was more interested in staying here.
That's
so
it.
I don't have.
What told you to go to the cannabis? That's what I'm quite interested in.
Thank you. I was heading that way too, John.
Yeah. Well, now I would I'm kind of a little bit I'm a candid person. I guess people have picked that up already, but I would say that the reason what told me to do it was it was definitely a different thought. It was definitely not my own panicking thinking that came to me when it was like, you need to get involved in medical cannabis. There's definitely things going on. We definitely have a lot of, everybody here on this phone call and everybody listening right now is being bombarded with signals of Wi-Fi and television and radio and satellite and all this transmission signals. And you don't seem to feel them at all or hear them at all. But if you tune into the right frequency, that's your favorite radio station or that's your favorite television station or whatever. Meanwhile, all those other channels are still flying through the air, right? And so your tuner is only picking up one of those channels at a time. That's a definite for sure. There's no doubting that in a scientific term, that there are FM radio signals and AM radio signals and television signals and digital television signals, and they're flying around in your house right now or wherever you're at right now, and they're all over the place, and they mean nothing to you as a biological unit, but as soon as you turn on a television set or a radio or a ham radio, there's that frequency being interpreted at a level where you can so hear it. It's bringing it into your audio or audio visual recepting abilities, right? So those are, and then one channel's on a different frequency than another channel, and you can only really tune into one or maybe two at a time. So this world, this construct, this piece of wood, this cup, this coffee cup, this table, these are all vibrational frequencies, and we're picking up the certain one, and other people pick up. I mean, other things pick up different frequencies. And so I don't really have a full understanding of all of that. I mean, there's a mountain of stuff to learn, and I never did so much research into anything as much as when my life was on the line and I was researching Dr. Raphael Mechoulam in Israel, who discovered the THC component back in the 60s. Lester Grinspoon, who researched all the medical papers of the 60s. And you figure with what Mechoulam came up with the 60s and what Grinspoon came up with the 60s, you figure from here on we're gonna understand this shit and move forward. No, instead they launched the war on drugs. And we're just crawling out of that 40 years later. So it's too complicated of a thing for me to have spent enough time on to give a qualified answer. And I really have been self-absorbed in pulling my own ass out of the fire. But now that I've done that, I'm trying to show other people how they could also do that too, and especially if they don't have any medical options. And that kind of opens it up in a freedom. So what spiritually brought me to that, I'm going to say, is probably that my belief in that there's always been something else going on other than the official story on almost any level, whether it's church or state. There's always something a little more than they're telling you. And so when I got really curious about that in around the 90s, I was thinking, why is it taking so long to understand what happened at JFK? Why is it taking so long? And then when the Hubble telescope, and this is about your spirituality answer, the Hubble telescope was something that they had spent tons of time on, or so they say. This is official story, okay, so don't laugh if you don't believe. They say they spent a ton of time on the Hubble telescope. This was costing billions of dollars, and then the shuttle goes up.
Clearance speaking.
Huh?
Oh, hey, guys.
Are you there?
Oh, hey, sorry. We just added THC, Anthony. Sorry. I've been saying I was going to do it for a long time and never did, and I wanted to do it before we took the break just to make sure we were actually able to get him on.
This is the guy going to tell us about THC. So I do want to just let me finish this thing. So, years ago when they were going to launch the Hubble telescope with the promise of, what did they say? They said it's going to be able to see back like eons. It's going to be like the eye of God. We heard all this stuff. And then, so they were going to launch it. They had spent billions of dollars in years, and there was a massive team at JPL and NASA, whatever. And then they launched a shuttle, and recall everyone that shuttle blew up. And then it became about the O-rings and all this other stuff. But the problem was, and whatever scam that was or not, doesn't matter. Point is, that Hubble telescope was meant to go up on the following shuttle flight, which would have been a few months later, 6 months later, had the first one not blown up. But since the first one blown up, they said, hey, we're not going to put our expensive whole bunch of $1 billion of satellite of this telescope on the next shuttle until we know for friggin' sure that we're not going to have another shuttle blowing up. So the next scheduled launch to take the Hubble telescope up was delayed by a long time, during which time they're trying to fix and make sure the shuttle's good, and then afterwards they're going to have some successful shuttle missions. But they got extra time, more than they originally anticipated, to spend even more time and even more research on the Hubble telescope. And why I'm belaboring this is because by the time they actually launched it, way after they needed to, way after they had originally intended to, they shoot it up there. And if you don't remember this, I do. They shoot it up there. It's up there. So they say. And they get the first pictures back. And they're saying, oh, God. The mirrors aren't working. We didn't calibrate it properly. We don't have a clear enough photograph. It's too fuzzy. We can't make
Get the squeegee. We're headed back up.
And it's so nuts to me that they said they were almost ready to launch it. It was going to go up on the next shuttle. Then they get all this extra time and money. And they had no reason to make it less perfect than it was months ago had they been able to do it. Now they got all this extra time and money to do it, and it still fucks up when it goes up there. And then they had to send a repair mission, and then they had to do this and that. And it took forever, right? And I thought, this has got scam written all over it, because how could you fuck it up with all that extra time when they said they were ready like a year and a half ago, right? So that didn't make sense to me. And that's when I was like, well, that's like the Kennedy thing. Here we are in the 80s. It's been 20-something years. We still don't know exactly what happened with this guy. And why does all that kind of shit take so long?
You have a good idea now.
Interestingly enough.
Yeah, apparently.
Apparently, here we go. Yeah. So finally, it all wraps up to me that there's a lot more going on than we're ever told. And this cemented my distrust and mistrust of all these official story kind of people. So by the time, and this is answering the question, by the time I have this knowledge, I'm carrying things, I'm casually looking into conspiracy here, conspiracy there, finding out things that are either buried or suppressed, being called a conspiracy nut by so many people now that so many things I called are actually true, but they never call up and say, gee whiz, I stand corrected. But anyway, by the time all that stuff gets done, and I've worked my way through the 90s, and I don't believe that Bill Clinton didn't have sex with that woman, and I'm seeing lies all over the place. Well, I'm so
Vince
sorry.
Foster?
Yeah, right. And Vince Foster and all those things. But by the time 9/11 happened, I was just like, okay, this is, you can't have a thing that is so surprising and devastating on the one hand, and we couldn't possibly know this was going to happen. Holy shit, in the morning. And then all of a sudden, by the afternoon, you've got the perpetrator and all the people that did it, and it's all been sorted out, and you figured it out, and you're going to go get this guy, and off that we go to Afghanistan immediately. I mean, you just can't figure it out that fast. If you were able to figure it out that fast, how come you didn't get a whiff of it in the first place? And we can go into a 9/11 discussion, but I'm not going to. Just enough to say I didn't trust it either. So now we're going into war at the end of 2001. And by the summer of 2002, personally speaking, I was going, this is fucked up. We're only a few months past the fires being put out on the site of the pile at Ground Zero. So that's not a normal fire. This whole series of lies, and all of a sudden we're getting shoehorned into war left, right, and center. And I had a personal meltdown crisis where I could no longer be a comic. I could no longer feel comfortable or funny talking about anything. I was depressed about everything. I couldn't even laugh at my favorite shows like Faulty Towers. Didn't even pull a grin out of my face. And I went into a harsh fucking depression in the 2002, coming out of the, I don't believe 9/11. I don't know what's going on in the world. This all sucks. I know we're going to be going to war. I know they're going to use it for an excuse, and that's exactly what they've done. And I am bummed the fuck out. Summer of 2002. Are you with me? So then I start just researching psychoactive compounds on the net because I wasn't a religious guy, but I felt better taking mushrooms. And I had experimented in an earlier time in my life with like taking acid and MDMA and all this kind of thing. But I thought, you know what? I just want to escape this fucking bullshit that scares the shit out of me. And most of my friends don't believe me when I talk about this stuff, so I don't even try anymore. And I just want to escape. I just want to have a different place to go and trip out. And during that field of study, I came across a substance that comes more available in South America than anywhere else in the world. And it's a brew, and it's supposed to be psychoactive, and it fascinated me, and I researched more about it, and they call it an entheogen. Entheo being to do with gods and spirits and that kind of thing, as opposed to just tripping out. And then I started to look at Terence McKenna, and I started to look at Tim Leary, and go through these researches of these people, looking back at what's his name, Aldous Huxley and the Doors of Perception and all of those. And that's
Carlos Castaneda.
Yes, exactly.
Great books.
And that's where I
Good
started
series.
to go. I started to go more towards that, say, than the average person, and definitely more towards that than now I'm going to try Christianity or now I'm going to try Judaism or some other religion. And I went to that psychoactive state because I felt comfortable. And then I started looking around the world at various places that were holding these kinds of drinking sessions in these close quarters and trying to suss out which ones were safe, which were dangerous, which were bona fide, which were a ripoff. And through a series of, doing research in 2002 on my old iMac that looked like a TV set, I came across a particular place, a duration of time, a series of events, a bunch of people that were going to be there, and a description of what it was going to like to participate in these things. And I went down to Brazil. I booked the trip in November of 2002, and in January of 2003, I wound up going down to the Amazon jungle and partaking of these particular shamanic rituals as an observer and a participant, and taking particular jungle brewed juices that are hallucinogens as well, or so they say, an entheogen, and experiencing tangible otherworldly events and circumstances that were later able to be bona fide in this material world. So you're talking about ayahuasca? Are my spiritual beliefs. The end.
Nice. This is ayahuasca you're speaking about, I'm assuming?
It is, but I didn't want to get into it because you know what happens now? It was all wonderful 15 years ago, but now a lot of vipers and a lot of bloodsuckers have decided to emulate the genuine goodness of this thing, and they're taking people's money, they're charging them too much, they're giving them stuff that's not bona fide, and sometimes physically groping, assaulting, ripping them off, and all kinds of shit. And once again, a great thing is being abused.
Alan, I got a question before we wrap up here. Well, I don't know if we are wrapping up.
We're not wrapping up. We're just
I grew up in Toronto. I grew up in Toronto. Did you grow up there as well? And if you did, whereabouts? Without getting too specifics.
That's okay. I was born in Scarborough General Hospital, which is at around Lawrence and McCowan Avenue, and Lawrence Avenue, McCowan Road, and in Scarborough, mid Scarborough, I guess. And I was there until I was 10. Then I moved to Don Mills, Ontario. This is a suburb of Toronto at this point, closer to the city.
Oh, yeah.
And I kept moving downtown, and then I was at Coxwell, Danforth, East End kind of area, and gradually, slowly, through the course of my life, moved right onto Yonge Street, which is the north-south divider. I kept moving west. Every single time I moved, it would be west and south. It was going great. And then I wound up having to move east to River Street. You know in Toronto where the Humane Society is on River Street in Queen?
I actually do remember. It's been a long time, but I don't even know. But I remember the area.
Yeah, so I rented a house there in 1991, and it was great. I was there for an entire month. Then I went to a New Year's Eve party with my girlfriend at the time. And when we came home, there was a complete full-on blaze with fire trucks everywhere, and they were just finishing up putting out the top 2 floors of a house we were renting, killing our dog. And decimating everything that we have. And that's my trial by fire. I thought it was all set up with this gal and everything was great, but then there was nothing but trouble after that. We never got it together. But that was a terrible fire, and they took everything out. So I lived there, and after that was done, off to Vancouver. I needed a new thing. I had to get out of here.
Right on. Yeah, it's the same. I was started in the suburbs, Thornhill, Richmond Hill, moved into Toronto, then the older downtown Toronto, Yonge and Eglinton, and then boom, out to BC. Out for 5 years, and then back home, and then now in between in Alberta. So
when were you in BC? What years?
99 to 2003.
Oh, okay, yeah, because I was out there from 92, beginning of 92 till the end of 96. So about 5 years also. Amazing. And then I came back to
we got to
Toronto.
have you back. You got to tell us about your show experience and then all the comedy you did too. That'll be a whole nother show.
Sure. Well, the reason I came back to Toronto in the first place, unfortunately, I was 33 years old. I loved Vancouver. It was fun. I was having a good time. And working there, it was my base as a comic, and I was traveling around the country and plying my trade as a stand-up comic, learning how to do that and trying to improve upon that. And unfortunately, I had to stop doing that for a while because my mother got cancer in the fall of, technically speaking, in the fall of 95, but it was diagnosed in February of 96. And she was gone before April was over. This was pancreatic cancer. But during that time, I had to fly back to Toronto and deal with her and take care of her and the hospital visits and back and forth. And so did my sister also. And we wound up living together, although we were years apart, trying to deal with this thing. And I just wound up, series of events. One thing led to another, and I wound up not moving back to Vancouver after that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And then you went to Alberta, huh? And where do you live now? Calgary?
No, in between.
Oh,
right in the middle.
Deer?
So.
Red Deer?
You betcha. Nice little place in the middle of it all. Yep.
The thing that freaks me about Calgary and Edmonton and Red Deer is that it's exactly in the middle, right? What's that going on there?
We're getting ushered. That's a polite warning that we've been running for probably 2.5 hours straight at 1.21 gigawatts. Just because of your energy, buddy.
Fantastic. Well, yeah.
You rock, and
we'll wrap it up then.
Well, see, here's the thing. We're not really going to wrap it up, so to speak. We're just going to take a little break.
We just need coffee and herbal essence and.
Okay, I understand all that. I'll be right here, so come back and we'll go some more. And if you have questions and you want to, let me
many.
I've said a lot of things, but I'm happy to answer questions or
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have a lot too.
We still have to show you a little flat before you leave. All right, we'll be right back, sir.
Okay, I'm right here.
Excellent. I'm going to take
Gravity.
half a second to give a little confession.
Hey guys, how are you?
Hey, how's it going, Anthony? Give me just a second. I'm going to do a little, give a little confession. We're going to go take a break, and when we get back from the break, we're going to get into some THC talk.
Okay, great.
Absolutely, brother. I'm all ears, man. It's been a great talk. But yeah, whenever you're ready, guys.
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Nice to talk with all you guys in this format, and we'll see you again sometime.
Yeah, it was beautiful listening to you, brother.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. If you get in a pickle, give it a try. You know, it was the only way, and it worked. It might work for someone else also.
Yeah, I've
Okay. No, I checked all over.
Interestingly enough, when you came on the Infinite Fringe with Billy Ray,
right?
I heard you talk, and I knew instantly that these guys were going to want to pick your brain and just sit down and just go over and spend hours talking to you. Right. So I've been really quiet this whole time because I've been waiting and waiting to get to listen to this because I was just so anticipatory in how good it was going to be. And I'm really having a great chance just sitting back and listening to you guys go. It's been such a good time, such a great conversation. And I just think
glad everybody's getting any kind of benefit out of it. That's great.
Well, I certainly have. If only an entertainment, but no, it's definitely been some great information. I mean, everywhere. Your talk to even the chat. If you've got the thing muted and you're just watching the chat, there are so many smart people in the chat talking and giving that great information too. So,
good.
Yeah, it's great.
We have some great people that are there regularly every week. We love you guys. Thank you so much for hanging out with us every week, guys, in the chat. I don't want to start naming names. I missed too many, but we appreciate it. And as you said, the information flowing through there this week has been phenomenal. So you've inspired a lot of folks today, Alan, for sure.
We got a little flat coming up, guys. I want to talk a little flat ski.
Absolutely.
I'm sure
We're going to do Gravity Coffee.
Right.
We're right back.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Well, my name is Joshua Corey. You're listening to IronRealmMedia and the Flat Earth Friday FRINGE-CAST. TGIF, thank God it's flat. We're going to go into a little bit of gravity because Cheyenne is one of our favorites. And for those of you that didn't know, Cheyenne is going to have a new album dropping soon. So keep an eye out on SoundCloud for Cheyenne and her new music.